10, 5, 11, 15. Hold on, slow down. 15, 16, 19. Hey, the fuck? Okay. Oh, I don't feel good. What it was?
Not let it go. What the fuck it is, nigga?
What is it, nigga?
That's the motto we live by for timing.
CJ Boozwain,
We got no
give it
time,
parler,
right?
avec, Congolese
Till I
Frank.
stack so high, right? For all the niggas who are close by, if you ain't about to please stay on the Lord's side. Big gun, eagle eye, that'll get your soul fried, right? That's the motto we live by, right? Tell all the folks
I tell these niggas act sick like my niggas won't air you or talk tough till you see me creeping in your rear view. So I dare you, if it's me you wanna harm G, shots make your heart stop, I'm out in a heartbeat. Always on my feet cause niggas sneak for the right price. So in these dark streets I keep it close like a nightlight. When I let it go they take it off like a race. Niggas always rap, why you think this mask on my face? Why you think I'm on this block making cash different ways? Nipping these heads with shots, pushing back your waves. Your mom catching
Heads
grief
of
when my
government,
niggas said
heads
they
of
laugh.
states,
But it's
heads
a
of
straight face
army,
when I
one
stick up for the
heads of-
stash. Yo, cause John knows I got some stacks at my base. But I'm still robbing niggas like I'm flat on my face. Still shooting shots, no shoes, getting laced. Doodle seem dirty, get away with no trace.
grinding. That's the motto we live by, put time in. Playing games, we got no time, grind. Till stack so high, right? For all the niggas who are close by, if you ain't about to please stay on the Lord's side. Big gun, eagle eye, that'll get your soul fried, grind. That's the motto we live by, right? Tell all of your foes die. Yo, I'll ride out for the close ones. Crunch time, do time for the close ones. When it comes down in the long run, you niggas broke on the man with the long gun. You're fucking with the wrong one. If my niggas broke, I'ma break. I'ma get you smoked out like a dope head. Nigga OD from this chrome lead. You owe me, pay me, or I should pay. Anything I find is mine, then I'ma check. Certain niggas shouldn't chip, better off with a check. Certain niggas shouldn't grip, freeze when they see feds. Freeze when they see goonies. But it's nothing like the movie. Bunch of young youths with nothing but a tune. But we still on our fucking. And the streets done tough me. I'm counting money, got me feeling so lucky. Still feeling cursed cause I sleep with a duppy. You niggas are sweet and me I'm on my munchies. I mean on my grungy. So come try slug me. I love guns and my gun loves me. Strap on my side like a wife and a hunky. Clean shit, nice shit, no kid cunny. Rubber band money, stack by the city. Come try jack me, I brought the strap with me. I brought the strap with me.
That color won't come off. I mean, theoretically, but that color won't come off.
Nothing you can do that makes me run away from this
I guess it could be. It's not like just a simple
and
paint.
there is no DJ can put the competition.
Whatever they're doing in Germany to American coins, this is being done by the mint. It's a 2011.
4, 3, 2, 1, and slap it. Got 43 saved for the package. They get their views up and then they're taking advantage. We kill it for the inside, baby. Miscarriage for the cabbage. Rest of the savage. Get a bandage. Niggas couldn't manage. Suplex on the canvas. I'm ready savage. You know that's the work of art. Silhouette, my niggas sliding. You wear the parts on parts. I can have that waist. From the point out days. A beast with a contact slave. Don't watch my age. Just watch when I pop my case. I fought engaged. When niggas wouldn't watch them ways. I'm not amazed at y'all. Talking band of chocolate train. That nigga we been spot the place and drop the strays from the strap that I got in case. It's like a hurricane. Them niggas gotta rock the place. So what my dudes now? It's like my dude Dave been doing now. When you start, get it like a U-Haul and move round. Kids got my music in class, burning the schools down. The demon killed Jesus. Get some king of the Jews now. A shot blast, it was blasphemous. Rip this piece off, Jesus sweat the Nazareth. You getting money, we gon' tax them all. We can slap the back and point nigga like a racquetball. Bike crash, nigga still rapping when I had cracked my jaw. Got a new strap to the body I can practice on. You niggas make this easy, call Keezy. Niggas disrespecting her set, she got TT. Couldn't take a shit on this paper, it's not TP. Put my fucking arm up, told me to drink green tea. I gotta put a watch these bags. I got an AR in this hockey bag. See, that's the most basic. When I step out the matrix, try to give you a playlist. I put that on my handkerchief. I'm from a gang of clips. Diamond cut when the banging up a banana clip. LL when the nigga carrying that cannabis. One time whenever they beating niggas on cameras, we transport weight, it's grams on a scale top. Work looks strong enough to bribe or have your bell product. Fuck consequence to go visit you with the bell cops. You're not home, I promise that you gon' see what that bell does. From the projects, then you gon' get your concept. From double or sip in the rock till out you in the complex.
Big and loud, but kind of small. And stab you wall.
Xavier. I handle all of y'all problems out in down and out. I'm talking now with Gucci, Polo, movie, Lolo with your hoe like Olos, go low and go low. I've been running around with the government for every fucking penny of GST.
Whatever the fuck it is, HST 13%. Fine, give me all 81 cents.
Got 100 grams of rubber bands, I bag it up and go and hit the strip, nigga.
Now what kind of game this is? I don't know, but I know that flag on the computer somewhere. Rounded them out, 1 penny, because this is a penniless society. And the thing that's empty that's inside of not eating.
Taps into it. Like if we're not trying, every time someone plays,
And look it up.
everything is connected to the song.
I know it's what I'm craving.
Yeah.
Because I will never eat another banana ever again. I don't care. I will hit a police officer in the face with a banana. They try to give it to me. I have an extra word. If I see a banana, there's a police officer that I'm hitting with it. It's not food. No one's scared of food.
Like a bit of a freak. Yeah. They just came out of the womb. Need to be speaking my truth. You never stepped in my shoes. Yeah. They're pulling up in the fuel. Niggas don't know what to do. I'm taking all of the loot. Whoa. I got my feel from the bay. We can be sleeping all day. I got their blood in my veins. Yo, I got their gold on my chain. Nigga, I'm going insane. I'm taking all of the hate. They disappear like a ghost. They keep my ducks in a row. I keep that bitch on her toes. Whoa. When you step into my zone, give me a hit on my phone. I get it over the low. Yo, pull up on your block, roll up easier. Chillin' with the homies makes it easier. I can sip on 40s, let you sip on this all night. I can sip on 40s, let you sip on this all night. Pull up on your block, roll up easier. Chillin' with the homies makes it easier. I can sip on 40s, let you sip on this all night. Hey, I can sip on 40s, let you sip on this all night. All night. Yeah, well, yeah. Whoa, what are you talking to me? Look at the price of the jeans. I got no time for a tease. No time for a tease.
Now I want to look up the import duties of coconut water. Just know
Niggas came out of the womb. Need to be speaking my truth. You never stepped in my shoes. Yo, I'm pulling up in a fuel. Niggas don't know what to do. I'm taking all of the loot.
demonstrate my Thai heritage and my francophone. There's a French word to the top here. I could go to the China Plus website at any time. Well, in case you didn't know this,
Batman.
it takes about 2 minutes to load that web page. It only takes 4 seconds to ping from China. Come on. So, the page is going to China.
That's why you nigga fuck this shit. They know it comes
Use it.
for a long
Down
time.
into the track house. Anyway.
Hey. YG back in the tracks and the crack shit, scraps and the stack. Niggas don't love you, that's a fact. Eat the Mac, no cheese. God bless me, no sneeze. Niggas see me and freeze. Shorty, no shit, tease. Got the strap to the slap, it moving like a stack. Never lack, just rack. Put them in a box, no jack. Roll one deep, never need a pack. Hey. Niggas know me from north to the south. Never need no one. Make my own cloak. Southside, reach apart. Nigga, that's my road. Niggas selling drugs, man.
I'm just wondering what people see when they look at me, because I don't spend all day looking at me. No, I'm just wondering, yeah, that gorilla look like he smoked weed. He probably smoked that shit.
Deep water, I track, I'll slow no
He didn't be going crazy right now. Look at it. He's not. He's
see my strap, they bless. I know they said I'll be shit when I was in the ditch. Now pussy, I'm rich. They low, don't switch. They solid one bitch. See the flick of the wrist. I'm on some shit. Talk shit, get hit. Big funk on me lit. I keep my stick. I let it flick just like a dick. I'm in this house like Saint Nick. She want my dick.
One of my
She know I'm
friends.
sick. I ain't that crip, that crack. I nip. I hit his lip if he talking shit. Hook is clicking. Hook is gang. I'll hit the
So
street
a
just
very
like
bad
I'm
place. He served as a child soldier, and that's all I'll tell you, because the CIC was still deporting him to find
she
out.
feels the pain. I'm in the rain. Hit a stain if it means getting paid. And this my click, you get
I don't remember what he told me. I think he said something I laughed.
You know it's a great.
He had the most shocked look on his face. He said something to me that basically said, 2 years unknown, I've never seen you smile before.
Hey.
Yeah, former child soldier.
Hit it with a slug.
I shocked him so bad the first time I laughed.
Gotta make sure my boys don't blow. They love my beat, they rate my flow. My neck is cold, it's 0 below. Big risk gon' shoot, you know I drove. I keep my heat, I ain't talking about a stove. I'm in a trap selling food, no fresh code. That nigga wants beef, my shop gon' blow. Every time I drop a chart, my code gon' grow. Made sure they told me, love my low. I should've known that she was right. Because of that, we really tight. I'll push my strap if she gon' fight. Hoodie on, all right at night. I'll show my might, never flight. 40 with the beam in me, exciting. I ain't missing, I ain't slipping, never tripping. Coke I'm whipping, check my waist, I'm really dripping. Packs I'm flipping, niggas talking, niggas stitching. Trigger finger, really it's tripping. Niggas that want me dead, nah, I ain't off yet. 2 in the head, these niggas run to God like Ned. Check my flag, it's really red. Married to the game, not newlywed. Niggas watch my every move, they just wanna see me lose. These niggas lost like Blues. My flow is sick, it's got the flu. Hey. I make red, just call me Dempster's in her mouth just like a denture. I am icy.
How do you say, kid?
That bitch, I'll never miss her. She respect me, call me Mr. Since she left, I have been better. Really wish.
Easy. All you need to do is to put no at the end. So it's 孩子们.
All right, then you say, how about well-behaved or not?
乖不乖?
You've been well behaved, you
The
wouldn't have
first
kids,
tone.
stupid.
So, how do you say, kids, behave or not? Or, did the kids behave or not?
In Chinese, it's 孩子们乖不乖? 孩子们乖不乖?
孩子们乖不乖?
4 degrees, rain to partly cloudy and 26 downtown Toronto.
Sometimes you and your family might be driving down the road.
Really yet? Where might
Hey,
you
Boozwain,
Happy family, of course.
Okay, so then what would usually happen?
Well,
Come on,
several
these,
of your brats might ask, are we
kids.
there yet?
That
Kids,
sucks.
kids.
How do you say that?
快到了吗?
快到了吗?
快, the fourth tone, which means be
Hey,
about
the
to do
alarm's working
something.
correctly.
快.
Sort of.
Down,
Quiet.
also the fourth tone, which means
Tu avais
to
le
arrive.
dong, j'ai besoin de dong.
Le is the completion of an
Yuan,
action.
yuan,
Ma
taxi,
is used to form a
yuan,
question.
Okay, so how do you say about to or fast?
快,
and then arrive,
到
and then the completion.
了
So how do you say, are we there yet? Or about to arrive, have we?
快到了吗？
That method doesn't work, bro.
快到了吗？
Like, no shit. That method, no, see, that's why they end up having the extra kids. And they
Well,
get
that
all the
concludes
kids.
our Chinese studio.
Take care and make sure that you strap in your kids and keep them from talking.
Okay, enough household talk. Let's do the quiz of the day.
How do you say, are we there yet in Chinese? And don't forget our great website at CRIEnglish.com. Click on Learn Chinese.
明天见。
明天见。
Join the most popular Chinese language learning page on Facebook by searching for CRI Learn Chinese. It's a quick yet fun way to achieve your language goals. Start your free lessons now with unlimited videos, photos, and text tutorials on expressions and Chinese culture. CRI Learn Chinese Facebook page. The world opens with 你好.
Right there.
You're listening to China Plus Radio, connecting you with China and the world. Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. As usual,
Shane Bigham with you on this Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. You're listening to the Beijing Hour, live from the Chinese capital. On today's program, Huawei is expressing disappointment over the decision to exclude the Chinese tech firm from the UK's 5G network.
So
Minimum
we feel
7 years.
that the competitive advantage that the UK had by
Now the
releasing the
headline-
spectrum early and early adopters will be lost by this announcement.
China's National Observatory has issued a new alert for rainstorms. The UN's warned that COVID-19 could
Bottle
set
that
back
water,
years
sell
or
it to
even
these people
decades
that
of
buy
economic
raw water.
progress. In business,
Asian
U.S. markets
water.
rally on strength in the energy sector. In sports, the Chinese Super League has released a shortened schedule for the football season. In culture and
Football
entertainment,
or
a film
American
about China's
football or
hunt
soccer?
for economic
Cock
fugitives. Stay tuned.
Do you know that soccer is
You're
half the word
listening to the Beijing
cocksucker?
Hour.
Right
60
there.
minutes of comprehensive news. Your window on China and the world.
It's not soccer, it's football. Don't fucking call that shit that gay word.
Welcome back. Now the day's top stories. Tech firm Huawei has expressed disappointment after the British government decided to prohibit it from working on the country's 5G
It's a minimum
system.
7 years.
Telecom operators
Headline
are
says,
required to
by
stop buying
2027.
5G
By
equipment from
2027
Huawei
means
after
within
the end of this year
2026
and
means
remove all
5.5
Huawei
years,
equipment
6.5
from
years.
Britain's 5G network by the end of 2027. Vice President Jeremy Thompson of Huawei UK says the decision means the country will lose its competitive edge in launching a 5G network.
So all your
5G
phones are gonna get sent
is
to
not
Apple
like the
anyway.
previous
It's gonna be
generation.
robbed by
It's what
scallies.
the next industrial revolution is going to be built on. So, we feel that the competitive advantage that the UK had by releasing the spectrum early and early adopters will be lost by this announcement.
The decision marks a major retreat for Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who in January agreed to give Huawei a limited role in the 5G network. Under the earlier ruling, Huawei would have been limited to providing 35% of equipment, such as radios and antennas, while being barred from supplying core components of the system.
Oh,
But that
dude,
move
what the
set up a
fuck do you
diplomatic
think
clash
the
with the
bugs are
United
gonna be,
States,
bro?
which has accused Huawei of spying and threatened to cut off security cooperation unless Britain dumped Huawei. However, Thompson has denied this is the case, the allegations, suggesting the real motivation was to protect American jobs. And for more on the UK's ban on Huawei, Huang Yue spoke to Martina Fuchs, a business analyst based in London and Zurich.
What's your
Hey,
take
wait
on
a
the ban
second,
on
what's
Huawei?
that mean?
It's a huge blow for Huawei and consumers here in the UK. This landmark
You're trying to hide your
decision will
German
delay the
accent.
rollout of the 5G network in the country by probably 2 to 3 years and hit mobile users very hard. They will now have to wait longer to get much faster data and increased capacity. As you know, 5G is the successor to 4G.
How many meters does the sea level have to rise to bury your
Experts
stupid
say
island?
it could be between 10 and 100 times faster for consumers. Now, UK operators have been given until 2027 to remove existing Huawei equipment from their 5G networks, but telecom giants like BT and Vodafone have already warned that customers could face higher bills and signal blackout if they were forced to remove all of Huawei's 5G gear in less time. There is also the additional cost, of course, of delaying deployment, and companies have already gone through the process of testing 5G equipment from Huawei, and this whole process, including the testing, will now have to be started all over again. This will also mean a more expensive network for the UK and mobile users here in the country, and a delay that could result in Britain's national infrastructure being inferior compared to other countries, mainly in the European Union.
Well, what impact could we expect from the decision on the UK and Huawei respectively?
Hanging up on Huawei has far-reaching ramifications. The UK's digital and culture minister admitted that the decision would mean a delay to the rollout of 5G by 2 to 3 years and could cost up to £2 billion for the UK. In addition, telecoms companies here will also have to stop using Huawei in fixed-line fiber broadband within the next 2 years. Now, the UK's shadow digital secretary said on Tuesday that the government has created a, quote, car crash for the digital economy and handling of Huawei. Look, 5G is becoming the nervous system of our future economy. We have reached a point of no return, basically. The new networks will carry data on everything from finance to business to critical infrastructure such as energy, defense, and transport.
It does cost
so people I spoke to here in London today wonder why can't the 5G network not be rolled out already now? Many believe this decision is a political one and doesn't have much to do with cybersecurity concerns.
Was business analyst Martina Fuchs commenting on the UK banning Huawei from the country's 5G system. China suggested that the decision on whether to restrict Huawei from the UK market will serve as a barometer of the safety of Chinese investment in the country. Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian made the remarks hours before Britain decided to prohibit Huawei from the 5G network.
And reopen in spite of COVID.
Whether the UK can provide an open, fair, and non-discriminatory business environment for Chinese companies will be the touchstone of the trend in the UK market after Brexit, as well as a barometer of the safety of Chinese investment in the UK.
Huawei has been operating in the British market for 2 decades. It employs 1,600 people in the country and supplies equipment to all major mobile and broadband service providers there. Earlier analysis suggested that restricting Huawei from helping to build Britain's 5G infrastructure would increase rollout costs by 9%. The Chinese president is calling for stronger economic and trade cooperation with Singapore and Thailand, while continuing to jointly fight the COVID-19 pandemic with them. Xi Jinping made the remarks in a phone conversation with the prime ministers of the two countries. The president says China is willing to share its anti-pandemic experience and enhance cooperation in drugs and vaccine research and development. He also calls for closer cooperation within the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative.
Totally different colors.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi has held a discussion with his Philippines counterpart, Teodoro Locsin. Wang says bilateral ties have been strengthened as leaders have reached important consensus on pursuing joint development while shelving disputes. He says China will continue to work with all parties, including the Philippines, to properly handle the maritime disputes in the South China Sea through dialogue and consultation, and uphold regional peace and stability. The minister also reiterates that reiterates China's stance to share its experience with the Philippines to fight against COVID-19 and promote cooperation on vaccine research and development. Locsin has expressed his country's willingness to work with China to further cement friendship and elevate cooperation. China's calling on the United States to stop disrupting regional peace and stability in the South China Sea. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Monday called for opposition to China's maritime claims over the region, which he described as illegitimate. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian says China's territorial sovereignty in the South China Sea is based on sufficient historical and legal evidence.
China has exercised the effective jurisdiction of the islands, reefs, and waters in the South China Sea for over 1,000 years. As early as 1948, the Chinese government officially declared the dotted line in the South China Sea, which was not questioned by any country for a long time.
Spokesman also stressed that China's not seeking to build a maritime empire in the South China Sea, saying the country remains committed to resolving territorial disputes peacefully through negotiations and consultations. Beijing's decided to impose sanctions on a U.S. company for its involvement in a recent arms sale plan involving Taiwan. Lockheed Martin is the main contractor of the $620 million deal that reportedly includes an upgrade package for anti-aircraft missiles on the island. For stronger understanding of what's happening in China and around the world, subscribe to the Top Story podcast. Coming up, China's issued a new alert for rainstorms that are pounding parts of the country.
The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour brings you an hour of comprehensive news and information from both China and the rest of the world. A mix of news, sports, and entertainment. In-depth analysis of the day's big stories, as well as the most comprehensive business of the day. The Beijing Hour. Beijing Hour. Your very own window to China and the rest of the world.
10 minutes past the hour. China's National Observatory has issued a new alert for rainstorms. Downpours are forecast to last for the next 3 days in multiple regions, from southwestern to eastern China. Continuous downpours have lashed large parts of the country since last month, affecting millions of people and causing huge economic losses. So far, over 400 rivers nationwide have exceeded alert levels, including 33 rising to record highs. Associate Research Fellow He Jingjing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences suggests the extreme weather is the latest proof of global climate change.
It is indeed very worrying that this year China has suffered a lot of extreme weather, and I do believe that this has something to do with the global climate change. Although there are many factors leading to the extreme weather in China at the moment, however, global climate change definitely has some impact upon the occurrence of more extreme weathers. As you know, that global climate change, global warming, have led to more frequent occurrence of natural disasters, including flooding. Therefore, it is very important to tighten the efforts to fight against global climate change.
China's raised its flood response alert to the second highest grade and allocated over $1 billion yuan, roughly $140 million for disaster relief. China will advance the construction of 150 new major water conservancy projects over the next couple of years. Projects cover flood control, irrigation, and water supply, as well as high technology in water conservancy.
Since June, heavy downpours have triggered severe floods in many southern provinces. The water level of over 430 rivers has exceeded flood warning levels, and 33 of them have seen unprecedented and historic flooding. Su Wei from the National Development and Reform Commission says the construction of major water conservancy projects will help to ensure national water security.
These projects are expected to increase the storage capacity for flood control by 9 billion cubic meters and the annual water supply capacity by 42 billion cubic meters.
Su adds that reinforcement work will be carried out along about 3,000 kilometers of river courses. Investment in the projects is estimated to reach nearly 1.3 trillion yuan, or around $185 billion, creating about 800,000 job positions annually on average. To raise funds for the projects, the official says The financing system must be deepened through the establishment of transparent market rules.
The central and local governments will provide investors subsidies to encourage social investment to get involved in the projects. Investors will get reasonable returns on their investment.
So far, more than 52 billion yuan, or around $7.5 billion of the central government's budget has been allocated for the construction of the major projects. Such investments will also be used to improve and upgrade water conservancy facilities. Wu Weiyuan is with the Water Service Center in Anyang City, Henan Province. He says that some old facilities have been upgraded.
During the inspection of the water gates, we found that its electric relays are broken, so we replaced 3.
Along with the investment, many regions have been equipped with information technologies to cope with flood situations. Zhao Chuan is a water drainage engineer in Hefei City, Anhui Province. He says that new technologies enable them to monitor the water situation more precisely.
Our intelligent flood control system allows us to see cloud and radar maps, hydrological information, and meteorological information, through which we can achieve better flood control.
Other places, including Henan Province, have also adopted new methods to monitor their water situation, such as drones and unmanned ships. For the Beijing Hour, I'm Chi Guang.
Chinese central authorities are warning against illegal manipulation in the Legislative Council election in Hong Kong. The city's opposition camp has recently organized what it called primaries. Mainland officials are suggesting that the act aims to hijack public opinion under the pretext of a referendum. Thus, it may have violated the national security law. Hong Kong's LegCo election is scheduled for September. A major organizer of the so-called primaries is Benny Tai, an advocate of Hong Kong independence. Mainland authorities are suggesting that he's also a political proxy of external forces in Hong Kong. Hong Kong residents say they're happy to see the restoration of social order following the implementation of the national security law at the end of last month. Many say they hope to seize the opportunity and help business recover as prolonged turmoil has plagued the city's economy. Guayan has more.
Many residents have expressed optimism concerning the outlook of Hong Kong following the implementation of the law of the People's Republic of China on safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. They say the law is critically important for safeguarding the prosperity and stability of the city. Wilson or Changxing is a member of the Hong Kong Legislative Council.
Hong Kong people are very happy to see the implementation of the law on safeguarding national security. They feel that they are safe walking on the street, and they're confident that the economy will recover very soon.
Since the law was adopted and took effect on June the 30th, local legislators say it has shown a clear deterrent effect against the black violence and separatist forces in the city. Vice Chairman Ness Xing of the Hong Kong Elderly Service Association says that residents have seen far fewer protesters on the streets.
When exchanging our ideas on street or in restaurants, we don't feel a sense of threat. For me, I'm supportive of the law safeguarding national security in Hong Kong because it guarantees our normal life and brings stability to society.
The prolonged social unrest and violence on streets put a constraint on local market activities and various businesses in the global financial center. As Hong Kong society gets back on track, members of local youth groups are hoping that the business resumption will offer more job opportunities for young people. Ying Chi Leng is a senior director of the Hong Kong Youth Federation of Diversification.
For young people who have just graduated and want to enter society, it will be hard to develop our careers if the unrest continues. We are not able to develop without a stable social environment. I hope the law will bring prosperity and stability to Hong Kong.
Months of social unrest has taken its toll on the economy of the Asian financial hub. It suffered a 9% slump in GDP growth for the first quarter. Many are hoping for a rebound during the rest of the year. For the Beijing Hour, this is Guoyan.
Coming up, the UN says the coronavirus crisis might set the world back years in terms of economic progress.
Want to know what's trending in China? China Plus News Facebook page helps you to discover the real China. From the latest news to quirky Chinese inventions, videos, photos, live streaming, and more. Join in the conversation today by searching for China Plus News on Facebook and discover its news, its people, its traditions and culture. China Plus News Facebook page. Open your eyes to the real China.
It's 18 minutes past the hour. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that the coronavirus pandemic might set the world back years or even decades in terms of economic progress. He says that the impact of the pandemic has fallen disproportionately on the most vulnerable groups in society.
Working hours, equivalent to some 400 million jobs, were lost in the second quarter of 2020. And we are experiencing the sharpest decline in per capita income since 1870. Between 7 and 100 million people could be pushed into extreme poverty, and some 265 million could face acute food insecurity by year's end, double the number at risk before the crisis.
Guterres is calling for an inclusive, networked, and effective multilateralism to deal with the crisis. And he adds that there's a need to look to new ways of working, learning, and consuming to move forward. The U.S. government has rescinded a new rule that could have denied international students a visa to stay in the country if they attend online courses exclusively. The government and two universities that had filed a lawsuit opposing the regulation reached a settlement before a Massachusetts judge on Tuesday. Harvard University and MIT filed the suit last week, seeking an order prohibiting the government from enforcing the new rule. According to the settlement, a March 3rd guidance allowing students to take their classes online during the pandemic while in the U.S. will be reinstated. The settlement applies to higher education institutions nationwide. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has slammed Donald Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, as well as the push to reopen schools and businesses. He accused the president of presenting Americans with a false choice between protecting their health and protecting the economy.
Mr. President, open everything now isn't a strategy for success. It's barely a slogan. Quit pushing the false choice between protecting our health and protecting our economy. All it does is endanger our recovery on both fronts.
Biden made his remarks as Alabama, Florida, and North Carolina recorded higher numbers of COVID-19 deaths on Tuesday. The rising U.S. cases and deaths have left educators in some states, including California, opting for online learning when the school year begins in a few weeks. The United States has recorded more than 135,000 COVID-19 related deaths and over 3.3 million infections.
California's going to go for
the Pan American Health Organization says Latin American countries have contributed more than half of all new COVID-19 cases and deaths being reported globally. Director Dr. Carissa Etienne says infections have risen to over 6.8 million, with more than 288,000 deaths in the region so far.
In the past week, our region has reported 60% of all new cases and 64% of all new deaths in the world.
She expressed concern that regional hotspots like the United States have reported record daily infections and spikes in deaths over the past week.
The number of people dying of COVID-19 is also climbing, particularly in Brazil, Mexico, and the United States of America, reporting some 77% of all the deaths over the last week and currently experiencing some of the deadliest outbreaks in the world.
The expert says that it's critical for countries to work together to ensure fair and equitable access to future vaccines or medicines to fight COVID-19. French President Emmanuel Macron says wearing masks will be compulsory in all public spaces in areas where COVID-19 returns. Speaking in a television interview on Bastille Day, Macron said France will be ready with enough stock of protective materials in case a second wave of the virus hits France.
Je souhaite que dans les prochaines semaines, on rende obligatoire. I wish that in the coming weeks, we make masks mandatory in all closed public spaces. We are doing it in public transport, which is working very well, but it's a bit erratic in closed public spaces. Restaurant protocols, for example, work very well.
Macron says France would be among the first countries to get access to a potential vaccine being developed by French drug maker Sanofi. He also says the pension reforms he spearheaded before the health crisis need reworking, and that the government would need to look at the financing of the reforms after the COVID-19 crisis. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has expressed frustration over the UK government's delay in making face coverings compulsory in English shops. Khan questioned the government's reasons for not implementing the rule earlier, suggesting the country needs to avoid having to impose a second lockdown.
The lockdown was awful for a variety of reasons, and that's why I'm frustrated at the delay from the government making face coverings mandatory in shops. I don't know why they waited this long. I don't know why the 2 weeks delay, and that's one of the reasons why it's really important the government gets a grip on this virus.
The British government has said that masks will be required in stores starting from July 24th, following weeks of equivocating and confused messaging. Environment Secretary George Eustace defended the government's delay in implementing the rule.
We've been evolving the measures we've had as we come out of lockdown, and we've been strengthening the guidance progressively on masks, making it mandatory first on public transport. Now we're going to that next step to make it mandatory in retail environment.
Those who flout the new rule can be fined up to £100 or $125 by the police. Scotland, along with European countries including Germany, Spain, Italy, and Greece, already require masks to be worn in enclosed spaces. The German government says it's on course to avoid a second wave of novel coronavirus infections. Helga Brun's Chancellor Angela Merkel's chief of staff, and he says containment measures, including social distancing, wearing masks, and quarantining in areas experiencing spikes in new cases, will continue.
The fact that the infections are too low is exactly the success of this measure. The fact that there is a distance, that there are hygiene concepts, the masks are worn. Therefore, when the numbers are low, these measures are not obsolete, but we must continue to maintain them in order to maintain these low infection rates.
Germany is considering travel restrictions for domestic regions affected by COVID-19 outbreaks. Citizens living in areas seeing a sudden, unexplained surge in fresh cases will not be allowed to leave the country. Germany so far reported over 200,000 confirmed cases, including more than 9,000 deaths. The German Chancellor says there's limited time for members of the European Union to reach a deal on proposals for a long-term budget and a stimulus plan. Angela Merkel made the remarks ahead of a meeting with her visiting Spanish counterpart, Pedro Sanchez.
It would be desirable to reach a quick result, but I don't know whether there will be success on Friday and Saturday. The time is pressing because we have to map out various programs. It's important to have certainty in order to plan ahead. And we agree, and Germany supports this very much, that we must also invest in the future. Digitization, climate change, those are the challenges that we are facing, and which will decide in the years to come whether we're economically successful or not.
She adds that her country is willing to push for a compromise on the European Recovery Fund at the upcoming summit of EU leaders. The European Commission proposed in May the $850 billion fund to help the bloc emerge from the economic crisis that was triggered by COVID-19, with 1/3 planned to be granted as loans. The fund will be the focus of the special EU summit on Friday and Saturday. Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan have failed to reach a deal at a new round of talks to regulate the flow of water from a hydropower dam built by Addis Ababa. Director Alyssa Jobson of Africa Regional Advocacy says she's still optimistic about reaching an agreement.
The talks have paused, so that the parties can put together a report for the African Union. But we've been hearing actually that the talks have been more constructive and that they've been making incremental progress. So we're quite positive about the progress that's been made. The key thing, I think, is keeping the parties at the table.
Every day,
the more they can talk, the more likely they are to reach an agreement.
3 countries have been engaged in talks to bridge their gaps over the filling and operation of the $4 billion Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile, which flows into the Nile proper. They signed a declaration in 2015 committing to reaching a deal through cooperation. Ethiopia began building that dam back in 2011. It's 28 past the hour. Beijing will be cloudy and 32 degrees Celsius there today. It's clearing up tonight with a low of 22. Chongqing will get some rain in 31, a low of 25. Laos is getting some rain in 25, a low of 13. Hong Kong's cloudy and 32, a low of 28. In North America, Washington, D.C. will be overcast and 33 Celsius. New York City is getting some rain and 29. In Africa, Nairobi is overcast and 20. Finally, to Oceania, Port Vila is overcast and 27 Celsius. It's time for a short break so far this hour. Huawei is expressing disappointment over the decision to exclude the Chinese tech firm from the UK's 5G network. China's National Observatory has issued a new alert for rainstorms, and the UN's issued a warning about the potential economic damage from the coronavirus. Shane Bigham with you. Stay with us here on the
6 months into the fucking worst recession we've ever seen. No, see, those were depressions. This is, I don't know what you call it.
Join the most popular Chinese language learning page on Facebook.
Says, hey, you might have some economic problems.
Learn Chinese. It's a quick yet fun way to achieve your language goals. Start your free lessons now with unlimited videos, photos, and text tutorials on expressions and Chinese culture. CRI Learn Chinese Facebook page. The world opens with 你好.
The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour brings you an hour of comprehensive news and information from both China and the rest of the world. A mix of news, sports, and entertainment. In-depth analysis of the day's big stories, as well as the most comprehensive business of the day. The Beijing Hour. Beijing Hour. Your very own window to China and the rest of the world.
Want to know what's trending in China? China Plus News Facebook page helps you to discover the real China. From the latest news to quirky Chinese inventions, videos, photos, live streaming, and more. Join in the conversation today by searching for China Plus News on Facebook and discover its news, its people, its traditions, and culture. China Plus News Facebook page. Open your eyes to the real China.
Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now here's your host,
Shane Bigham with you on this Wednesday morning. Still to come in business, U.S. markets rally on strength in the energy sector. In sports, the Chinese Super League has released a shortened schedule for the football season. In culture and entertainment, a film about China's hunt for economic fugitives. There are a number of ways to contact us. You can talk to us on Twitter at China Plus News or log on to Facebook, China Plus News, for more news, videos, and analysis. Now looking at the day's headlines, the Chinese president is calling for stronger economic and trade cooperation with Singapore and Thailand, while continuing to jointly fight against the COVID-19 pandemic with them. Xi Jinping made the remarks in phone conversations with the prime ministers of the two countries. The president says China is willing to share its anti-pandemic experience and enhance cooperation in drugs and vaccine research and development. He also calls for closer cooperation within the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. Foreign Minister Wang Yi held a discussion with his Philippines counterpart, Teodoro Locsin. Wang says bilateral ties have been strengthened as leaders have reached important consensus on pursuing joint development while shelving disputes. He says China will continue to work with all parties, including the Philippines, to properly handle the maritime disputes in the South China Sea through dialogue and consultation, and uphold regional peace and stability. The minister also reiterates China's stance to share its experience with the Philippines to fight against COVID-19 and promote cooperation on vaccine research and development. Locsin's expressed his country's willingness to work with China to further cement friendship and elevate cooperation. China is calling on the United States to stop disrupting regional peace and stability in the South China Sea. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Monday called for opposition to China's maritime claims over the region, which he described as illegitimate. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian says China's territorial sovereignty in the South China Sea is based on sufficient historical and legal evidence.
China has exercised the effective jurisdiction of the islands, reefs, and the waters in the South China Sea for over 1,000 years. As early as 1948, the Chinese government officially declared
never know
flying in
American
South China
Indians
Sea.
over there.
It was not questioned by any country for a long time.
The spokesman also stressed that China is not seeking to build a maritime empire in the South China Sea. Tech firm Huawei has expressed disappointment after the British government decided to prohibit it from working on the country's 5G system. Telecom operators are required to stop buying 5G equipment from Huawei after the end of this year and remove all Huawei equipment from Britain's 5G network by the end of 2027. Vice President Jeremy Thompson of Huawei UK says the decision means the country will lose its competitive edge in launching the 5G network.
5G is not like the previous generations. It's what the next industrial revolution is going to be built on. So, we feel that the competitive advantage that the UK had by releasing the spectrum early and early adopters will be lost by this announcement.
The decision marks a major retreat for Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who in January agreed to give Huawei a limited role in the 5G network. Under the earlier ruling, Huawei would have been limited to providing 35% of equipment, such as radios and antennas, while being barred from supplying core components.
Okay, so like, 35%
Chinese central authorities are warning against illegal manipulation in the Legislative Council election in Hong Kong. The city's opposition camp has recently organized what's called primaries. Mainland officials are suggesting that the act aims to hijack public opinion under the pretext of a referendum. Thus, it may have violated the national security law. Hong Kong LegCo's election is scheduled for September. A major organizer of the so-called primaries has been identified as Benny Tai, an advocate of Hong Kong independence. Mainland authorities also suggest that he's a political proxy of external forces in Hong Kong. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that the coronavirus pandemic might set the world back years or even decades in terms of economic progress. He says that the impact of the pandemic has fallen disproportionately on the most vulnerable groups in society.
Working hours, equivalent to some 400 million jobs, were lost in the second quarter of 2020, and we are experiencing the sharpest decline in per capita income since 1870. Between 7 and 100 million people could be pushed into extreme poverty, and some 265 million could face acute food insecurity by year's end, double the number at risk before the crisis.
Guterres is calling for an inclusive, networked, and effective multilateralism to deal with the crisis. The U.S. government's rescinded a new rule that could have denied international students a visa to stay in the country if they attended online courses exclusively. The government and two universities that had filed a lawsuit opposing the regulation reached a settlement before a Massachusetts judge on Tuesday. Harvard University and MIT filed the suit last week, seeking an order prohibiting the government from enforcing that new rule. According to the settlement, the March 3rd guidance allowing students to take their classes online during the pandemic while in the United States will be reinstated. The settlement applies to higher education institutions nationwide. This is Shane Bigham live from the Chinese capital. Coming up in business, U.S. markets rally on strength in the energy sector.
You're listening to the Beijing Hour, 60 minutes of comprehensive news, your window on China and the world.
We're at 37 minutes past the hour now. Turning to business news, U.S. stocks ended higher on Tuesday as a broad rise in the energy sector bolstered the market. The Dow Jones jumped 2.1%. The S&P 500 was up by 1.3%. The NASDAQ increased by 0.9%. Wall Street also poured through a slew of earnings reports and economic data. JP Morgan Chase delivered earnings that beat estimates. The stock closed 0.6% higher. Citigroup shares were under pressure after the company reported mixed results. Randy Watts is Chief Investment Officer at O'Neill Global Advisors.
In terms of the technicals, the S&P and the NASDAQ should find support initially right now around the 21-day moving average. That's about 2% lower than we are right now. But I would caution investors that the markets have had a very, very big move in the last quarter. In fact, the last quarter was the best quarter for NASDAQ performance since the fourth quarter of 1999, so a very long time ago. So it would be normal action right now to see the market either pull back or go sideways.
Up
So we
time.
would tell
I
investors to maybe
remember
be
the fourth
cautious right
quarter
here.
of '99.
European markets finished mixed as of the
Second
most
and
recent
third quarter,
closing
too.
prices. The FTSE 100 gained less than 0.1%. The CAC 40 fell by 1%, and the DAX dropped 0.8%. In Asia, stocks on the Chinese mainland closed lower on Tuesday. Financial analyst Wang Lihuan.
We had a very volatile trading day today. The Shanghai Composite was down as much as 2% during trade before closing 0.8% lower at 3,414 points. Turnover still remained above 1.5 trillion yuan for the 7th day in a row. But today, overseas investors offloaded a record 17.4 billion yuan of A shares via the Stock Connects with Hong Kong. And there's also profit taking ahead of a massive amount of shares that will soon be available for sale as lockups end. Today, recently high-flying stocks dropped the most, including IT stocks, new energy vehicle-related, and duty-free related stocks. Bucking the trend today, defense stocks and VR concept stocks rose. And we're also looking at SAIC Motor. It jumped almost 5%. That's after SAIC Volkswagen said that they will invest 4.1 billion yuan into their Shanghai plant to make new Audi sedans.
In the meantime, in Hong Kong, stocks closed down more than 1% yesterday. Elsewhere, Singapore stocks finished lower on Tuesday with the Straits Times index going down by 0.4%. Tokyo stocks closed lower. The Nikkei lost 0.9%. Chinese currency is strengthened against the U.S. dollar as foreign funds flock to yuan-denominated assets, betting on the country's economic recovery. Since July 6th, the yuan's gained 600 pips and is now just below 7 against the dollar, with overseas capital inflows into Chinese A shares in the first 11 days of July topped that of June to hit 65 billion yuan, or roughly $9.3 billion US dollars. Overseas investors have also been increasing their holdings of Chinese bonds in a net amount of 322 billion yuan in the first 6 months of the year, 1.4 times that of the same period last year. Analysts say market confidence in yuan-denominated assets has been boosted by China's prevention and control measures against COVID-19 and the country's economic recovery. China saw its foreign trade rise 5.1% year-on-year in June. Meantime, imports and exports went down 3.2% in the first half of the year to around 2 trillion US dollars. The General Administration of Customs says the country registered better than expected foreign trade performance. ASEAN remained China's largest trading partner. With more on this, Sui spoke with John Ross, Senior Fellow of the Chungyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University.
So first of all, what can we tell from the foreign trade numbers for June and also for the first half of this year?
Well, they show a very clear pattern. It's just the June number is rather good, and the earlier part of the year is very bad. So that's showing the recovery of the economy. I mean, China's got the advantage in the present situation where the world economy is being hit by coronavirus in two things. One is basically the virus under control of China, so therefore it's able to open its own economy. And secondly, the part of the world economy which is recovering most from coronavirus, because it's got the best record against the coronavirus, is in Asia. And of course, many of China's most important trading partners are in Asia, so China's therefore benefited from that situation, whereas the European or US economies are much more depressed. So China is doing well itself, and many of China's Asian trading partners are doing quite well as well.
In general, how have those export-oriented companies in China been affected by the pandemic?
Well, overall, of course, they've been affected negatively. And it would be very surprising under the present circumstances if world trade did not decline by even more than world GDP, although, as I mentioned, they're partially protected by the situation which is within Asia. So the June numbers are rather good and show some recovery, but it will probably take till the end of the year at least to have a full recovery from the situation, because they must have suffered major losses during the first 3 or 4 months of the year.
So what's still needed to do to stabilize foreign trade by the authorities for the rest of the year?
Well, there's a limited amount that China's own authorities can do, because trade by nature has to involve another country as well. So it's not the only thing that China can do. The biggest problem China confronts is the very bad situation in the United States, where the virus is completely out of control, and therefore this will have very negative effects on the US economy. The decline in US GDP so far on the other hand, the situation in Asia, South Korea, Japan, ASEAN in particular, is quite good in recovery. So the Chinese authorities will just have to do whatever can be done in the South China Sea. But the June figures are certainly encouraging. It means that despite the problems which exist in the United States and Europe, that China's trade is beginning to recover quite sharply from the downturn in the first half of the year.
That was John Ross, Senior Fellow of the Shanghai Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University, talking about China's foreign trade. Official data shows that China's cross-border e-commerce trade increased by 26% year-on-year in the first half. Exports were up by 29%, and imports grew 24%. An official says strong demand for e-commerce emerged in the first 6 months of the year because of the novel coronavirus. The country started the pilot service at 10 customs offices in cities including Beijing, Hangzhou, and Shenzhen on July 1st to simplify the cross-border business-to-business customs procedure. 1 week after the pilot project, around 270,000 sheets of clearance orders for cross-border e-commerce had been checked, worth 250 million yuan. The goods, covering clothes, small home appliances, and mobile phone parts, were sent to Europe, Southeast Asian countries, and the United States. Huawei posted revenue of 454 billion yuan, roughly $65 billion in the first half of the year, despite the effects from COVID-19, and that marks growth of 13% year-on-year. The tech giant has a net profit margin of 9.2%. The company says information and communications technologies have become a crucial tool for combating COVID-19 and have become an engine for economic recovery. Huawei reiterated its commitment to working with carriers and industry partners to maintain stable network operations, accelerate digital transformation, and support efforts to contain local outbreaks and reopen local economies. Travel agencies in China been given permission to resume group tours that cross provincial borders, following a period of suspension because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But the tours are still prohibited in areas with medium and high risk levels for COVID-19. Overseas group tours are still banned. The limit on the number of visitors allowed in tourist attractions will be set at 50% of the maximum capacity. Tourists are required to show their health QR codes to travel agencies when signing up for the group tours and have the codes checked once again before starting the actual travel.
Really?
A new China-Europe freight train service is opened. The route links Anzhi, Russia with Jinhua, Zhejiang province. It's also the third route linking Jinhua with a European city. The train will take 16 days to arrive in Russia from Jinhua. The freight train service in Jinhua expects to operate 300 trains this year, with the number of trains to Europe and Central Asia to reach 570.
What you got on those trains?
At 46 minutes past the hour, the Chinese Super League has announced its schedule for a COVID-shortened season.
The Beijing Hour.
Hello, I'm Peter Dinklage from X-Men Days of Future Past. You are listening to the Beijing Hour.
Hi, I'm Kathy Freeman, and you're listening to the Beijing Hour.
Hi everyone, I'm Lang Lang. Welcome to the Beijing Hour.
The Beijing Hour, your window to China and the world.
It's 46 past the hour now. Turning to sports, and here's Younghua.
Thank you, Shane. The 2020 Chinese Super League season will be shortened to 40.
From Toronto Police, Detective Nancy McKee says they have certain information that leads them to fear there may be other victims.
Well, we don't like to go into what's called a fishing expedition, so obviously we follow the evidence, and if we have reason to suspect or believe that there are other victims, then we reach out to the public.
Ramsey teaches communication technology. He's worked at Vanier since 2007. I'm Mark Douglas.
680 News Time, 7:49. As Ontario and other provinces reopen bars and restaurants for indoor drinking and dining, Canada's Deputy Chief Public Health Officer says there are risks involved in having people congregate inside. Dr. Howard New says the spread of COVID-19 can be similar to that of the spread of cigarette smoke.
And so if someone is outside smoking, you can smell the smoke, but the smoke and the fumes or whatever can dissipate quite rapidly outdoor with obviously the air currents. If you're indoors and
no, they don't. That's why we have separately ventilated smoking rooms.
plume or
It's
the
a
cloud
political
of smoke
decision to rip them
lingers
out.
longer, and you're
Only
exposed for a
applies in
longer period
Ontario
of time.
and Toronto separately, unless you're a federally registered corporation, which case you're required to provide separately ventilated smoking rooms. CBC has.
The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board concerned about housing price
So I know they don't go
as
outside
home
ever.
prices rise. The group
Even
of
if they smoke
Toronto
cigarettes,
realtors
it's a
says
smoking
government should focus economic recovery plans on the housing supply and keep an eye on demand. The organization says despite the COVID-19 recovery, many people are going forward with plans to buy homes. And even though the number of home sales did drop, prices were stable because buyers and sellers pulled back in equal measure. The board says rather than focusing on stimulus measures to boost homeowners, the group of 56,000 realtors says improving the supply of homes should keep prices affordable for buyers. At the Business Center, I'm Chris McCusker.
It's funny because you got more empty houses than you got homeless
answers to your
people.
questions about COVID-19. While new
Not
cases
even
continue their decline,
You
one
got
listener
shitload of
is
homeless
wondering how people are still contracting the virus. Toronto's Associate Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Vanita Dubé, explains the recent data officials have when it comes to transmission.
We know that 60% are still saying that they got it from a close contact or a household member. 25% are still getting it in the community. So what that means is we can't quite pinpoint where they got it from. About 9 or 10% are getting it from healthcare. Less than 5% are getting it from
10% are getting it from healthcare.
Dr. Dubé says these percentages have remained the same for several weeks now, but officials are closely watching the data on community spread, not wanting that figure to get above 25%.
Oh, wow, because it's a good percentage.
Time for traffic and weather together on the lines. Here's Kyle Hawking.
This report is brought to you by Don Valley North Toyota. We're short on issues right now, but if you're traveling the eastbound 403 coming out of Hamilton, heading for the eastbound QEW, we've got that ramp down to a single lane. So the eastbound 403 ramp to the QEW in Burlington has the right lane blocked on it. Only the left lane is open. So there's been a bunch of others. It's maybe pretty slow south of the 407 in each direction. That's because we have
sick dogs.
Batman. 20 shit coming back. Hey. Man, why just Batman 2019? I'm weak, nigga. Fuck that shit. Man, you know he coming back. Or down. No, bro. Hey. YG back on the tracks and the crack shit's back to the stack. Niggas don't love you, that's a fact. Keep the Mac, no cheese. God bless me, no sneeze. Niggas see me and freeze. Shorty, no shit, he's got the strap. Let's slap it, moving like a stack. Never lack, just rack. Put him in a box, no jack. Roll one deep, never need a pack. Hey. Niggas know me from north to the south. Never need no one, make my own cloak. Soul side, reach your heart, nigga, that's my road. Niggas selling drugs, man, I'm in a drought. They all know what I'm about. Stuck for it, talk shit, catch sled to the head. Off the shits, no meds, what the fuck on the red. Stay away from the feds, on the streets, no bed. Hey, deep water, I track, off snow, no sled. Off swamp, me dead, this day I dread. Bitch gave me head, see my strap, they fled. Hey, I know they said I don't be shit when I was in the ditch. Now pussy, I'm rich, they low, don't switch, they saw the one bitch. See the flick of the wrist, I'm on some shit, talk shit, get hit, big punk, come in lit. I keep my stick, I let it flick just like a bick. I'm in his house like old Saint Nick. She want my dick, she know I'm sick. I ain't a crip, that crack I nip. I hit his lip if he talking shit. Fuck his click and fuck his gang. I'll hit the 3 just like I'm dang. She wanna gang that 40 I bang. If he owe my gang, them hollows tang. My shorty's pang. She loves when I sing. She feels the pain. I'm in the rain. Hit a stain if the means getting paid. And this my click, you getting laid. I'm in the trap, the cops did a raid. I got that work, you know it's A grade. Watch that, man, you know we rockin', man, wire and DC. We'll find the paint, man, you know we rockin'. Got the whole strip locked down, cuz. Hey. Hit it with a slug, gon' make a move slow. You know me, I'm all about my dough. Gotta make sure my boys gon' glow. They love my beat, they rate my flow. My neck is cold, it's 0 below. Big wrist gon' shoot, you know I drove. I keep my heat, I ain't talking about a stove. I'm in a trap selling food, no fresh code. That nigga wants beef, my strap gon' blow. Every time I drop a track, my cloak gon' grow. Made sure he told me, don't love a hoe. I should've known that she was right. Because of that, we really tight. I'll bust my strap if she gon' fight. Hoodie on, all right at night. I'll show my might, never flight. 40 with the demon, he inciting. I ain't missing, I ain't slipping, never tripping. Coke I'm whipping, check my waist, I'm really dripping. Packs I'm flipping, niggas talking, niggas snitching. Trigger finger really itching for fun. Niggas that want me dead. Nah,
that's it from here. It's the fucking whatever lessons.
Different places in Macau and no more. And inside they are also selling books from Macau, cultural books, and small Legos games. It's important.
On July the 15th, 2005, more than 20 sites in Macau's historical district were added to UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites, including the ruins of St. Paul's, Mandarin House, and the Amma Temple. In 2014, Macau issued the Cultural Heritage Protection Law, which aims to protect historical urban areas in particular and ensures the complete preservation of the original characteristics of the city.
That was Cheege reporting. At 54 past the hour, Friends actor David Schwimmer's new comedy, Intelligence.
Got me a 2 in the head, these niggas run to God like Ned. Check my flag, it's really red. Married to the game, not newlywed. Niggas watch my every move, they just wanna see me lose. These niggas lost like blues. My flow is sick, it's got the flu. Hey, I make bread, just call me Dempster's inner mouth, just like a denture. I am icy, looking pressure. Fuck that bitch, I'll never miss her. She respect me, call me Mister. Since she left, I have been better. Really wish I never met her. These niggas like a letter.
Yo, come on, follow the map, my controller who will hold you like a stiff dick, will work you like a victory. I'm crazy back to shit, it's getting ill sick, and deck out the burbs, nigga, it's the big nicks. Coming fast from the vats of black wax, in fact, I cramp stacks of acts upon the shelves, so fans can help themselves, I prove my record sales. Move along, cause yo, there ain't no pausing, I'm causing catastrophe. I hate to be the one coming after the black dick dastardly. I heat them up even in winter. I spin the beginners, I'm eating pussies for dinner, but just remember, I ain't no downtown clown, I run the mellow ass sounds, the real shit, boy, straight from the dead ground. Easy back it up. 5 for 5, wanted dead or alive. Was feeling soft with tennis with sour cream and chives. No job if I was you, I'd come through and catch a dose of my strict technique. Straight from Suicide Street. I work a beat like a cop. Trash a pawn shops, frontin' city trends, cause I'm giving niggas speed knots. Yeah, there ain't no frontin' on the fact. Consider deadly in my habitat like a goon spot trap. I run the J-Bass sounds, I'm whooping real shit down. So check shorty, straight from the dead ground. Your dead land kids, dirty biz for niche, revive a hash, dig a stash, know what I'm saying? I'm out the range like stank on sewage. If your record ain't out by now, you fucking blew it. I ain't here to welcome faggot imitations. I smother brothers and watch a fade from that suffocation. I got shorties in irreversible comas, wild styles, wreck trash like super vets doing donuts. Chill out and post it at the Barbary Coast where queens be on the scenes in less than apple scenes. I do my tracks like country blacks, ain't fat, doper than a sack of crack, crushing eggs and back, no question. I'm putting the rest in your notions are coming west. Without your bulletproof vest.
What the hell? Sitting like a fucking monkey.
In my best
I want that damn
your
shirt.
SS was dropped on the rocket set. Check, stay out the park if you're scared of the talk. Understand? I'll be around. Straight from the dead.
How many white people would have bought that shit or would never thought you're not gonna? Oh, it's a racial slur. I think this one came to our heads. You gonna run for 10 minutes again? Look at the default settings: 10-minute alarm, 10-minute snooze.
Till the dreams recast. We beat them schizo kids. Hey yo. I hold a murderous mind, it's dark and twisted and blind, demented defined, and lethal around, the dark matter master, spit natural disasters, rust the bone fractures, and blood plasma flash. I'm the one you don't get to play with, cause I'll finish you, sick in the cerebral, insanely relinquish a flurry of pain and
who knows? Perhaps if the village of Curram had not been mentioned by Louis, no trouble would have occurred. But by one of those coincidences that would outrage the reader of a novel, but of which life is full, the customer waiting in the chemist shop happened to know someone who lived in Curram. In fact, his sister-in-law, Harriet Staunton. Yes, this gentleman had married Mrs. Richardson's elder daughter, and he knew all about the trouble with the Stauntons. His mother-in-law had often expressed her fears for Harriet, and when he heard the name, he pricked up his ears. He went further. He got the name of the doctor who had given the death certificate and went to see him. As a result of his interference, the thing the Stauntons feared most was brought about. There was an inquest. The inspector in charge of investigations, Inspector Thomas, was not quite sure of his ground. He talked it over with his superior.
You see, sir, the doctors haven't found any organic disease sufficient to account for death. There was a small tubercular deposit in one lung, but they say it was of no importance. We've got an expert from London down here, and he states there is no trace of poison in any of the organs. And yet I'm still convinced that she was murdered. How do you think it was done, Thomas? Well, that's just what I don't know, sir. I've never seen a body so emaciated as hers was. If it didn't sound so incredible, I'd say she'd been starved to death. But the maid at Mr. Patrick Staunton's house, where the deceased lived before coming to Penge, says that she was treated as an honoured guest. Did you search the house? No, sir, I didn't think it was necessary. Might be worthwhile, Thomas. Have a look at the room she was using. She might have left some diary or letters behind, and try to find some people in Curram who saw Harriet Staunton before she was brought to Penge. They might have noticed something on the laundry. Right, sir. Thank you very much.
Inspector Thomas didn't find any diary or letters. The Stauntons had made quite sure that all Harriet's belongings were burnt. But what he did see made such documents unnecessary. One glance at the attic room in which Harriet had starved made it quite clear that whatever her position in the family, she had not been treated as an honored guest. The filthy mattress lay on the floor, the window was boarded up, and the door had been fitted with a bolt on the outside. These facts carried great weight with the jury at the inquest, and a verdict of willful murder was returned against Patrick and Elizabeth Staunton, Louis Staunton, and Alice Rhodes, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Such was the popular feeling in the district that the trial was moved to London and took place at the Old Bailey in September 1877. The defending counsel, Mr. Edward Clark, presented his case in a very unemotional manner.
Members of the jury, I want you to divorce from your minds to the present any feelings of indignation that the prosecution might have inspired in you. The task on which I am about to embark is, I say it myself, an extremely difficult and extremely technical one. The event is that Harriet Staunton died from tubercular meningitis. Now, members of the jury, you've probably never heard of this disease. Indeed, it is one almost unknown to the ordinary member even of the medical profession. But I am going to attempt to present all the known facts about it to you. For I am certain that the death of Harriet Staunton was due not to poison, not to starvation, but to this relatively unknown disease. Now, first of all, I would like to make a few general observations.
Mr. Edward Clark's speech to the jury was long, technical, and brilliant. It was generally thought that had he been alone with the jury, he'd have succeeded in convincing them. But the judge, Sir Henry Hawkins, gave one of the most deadly summings up ever known in the Old Bailey. Indeed, his speech might better have come from the lips of the prosecuting counsel, and its effects were inevitable. All 4 prisoners were sentenced to death. It was then that the letters began to pour into the Home Secretary's office.
Emails from your phones?
October the 12th. Dear sir, regarding the scant attention paid to the expert medical opinions in the trial of the Staunton, I would wish to state my conviction. Signed by 700 medical experts, with Sir William Jenner at their head, to the effect the facts as stated at the post-mortem point clearly to death having been caused by surgery.
I'm glad to know this morning that you are to reopen the case of the Staunton. I feel sure that when the proof
The result of the new inquiry was that the sentences of Louis and Patrick Staunton and Patrick's wife Elizabeth were commuted to penal servitude for life, while Alice Rhodes, who stood to profit most from Harriet's murder, was granted a free pardon and immediately released. It seems that from the purely legal point of view, the paying of £1 a week to Patrick and his wife for the care of Harriet placed them under a special obligation to prevent her from starving. Consequently, their guilt was, in the eyes of the law, greater than Louis's or his young lady. And so, the case of the 2 inseparable brothers came to an end. Callous, yes. Brutal and ruthless, yes. But there remains their outstanding love for each other. Patrick and Louis, who, when the sentence of death was being passed on them, forgot their womenfolk entirely and clasped each other's hands for mutual encouragement, thinking only of the great love which ironically made their savage crime possible.
Actually, yeah, is this World Today? Is this World Today?
Round Table.
Round Table.
Round Table.
Connecting China and the world.
We bring you fun and timely discussions about what's affecting our lives everywhere, every day. Tune in to Round Table, where the East meets the West, and understanding is the goal.
Parts of World Today, it's what's talking.
Insightful analysis, bold comments, friendly debates. Find all that and more.
Situations all the time. It's a job that requires tenacity, calm, courage, and
statistician.
To Roundtable, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm He Young, joined by Lai Ming and Patrick Flannery. Good as always to have you for this ride. On today's program, we take a look at how COVID-19 and recent visa policies have stymied China's overseas studies sector. Where are these students going to go? Maybe stay domestically and pursue their studies, and what are the difficulties that they're going to face in that case? We will get into it. And China is facing a critical period for flood control, with strong and sustained rainfall expected in the coming weeks and more than 38 million people already affected. What needs to be done, or what already has been done to contain the flooding? You can find us on Apple Podcast at Roundtable China. Subscribe, rate, and review us. It will help other folks to find the show. But first, on today's Roundtable. For the first time in decades, Chinese students who've applied for overseas studies, that's universities, are having second thoughts after getting an offer. With a global pandemic that's effectively stopped on-campus learning, coupled with hostile visa policies coming from the U.S., the choice of studying abroad is more complex than ever. So, first of all, guys, let me direct this.
Wait a second.
Broadcasting Company presents The Adventures of Sam Spade, Detective.
The Kimberly Cross Caper.
Sam Spade, Detective Agency. This is Miss Bergamot. Oh, Miss Bergamot, I'm so sorry, but Mr. Spade isn't in. He ought to be back any moment, however. That is, if you wish to employ him. This is his secretary, Miss Breen. But as a matter of fact, Miss Breen... Oh, he'll be available, I know. The matter he's attending to is, it's purely routine. What he calls a humdrum number. Humdrum? Well, it's a private detective version of babysitting. You see, all Mr. Spade had to do was sit on a chair for 24 hours. And that's why I say he'll be back any minute. His last words to me were, take anything. So if you desire his services... I do not desire Mr. Spade's services. As a matter of fact, he's using mine. What? I'm his nurse at the Harbor Emergency Hospital.
Nurse, another shot. Please, this time, bourbon.
Oh, quite quietly, Mr. Spade. He's coming along quite nicely. The bullet isn't into the cranium at all. Bullet? Cranium? So, Mr. Spade wants to...
But I refuse, nurse. I refuse. But, Miss Nightingale, I am. F. Wonder Girl.
Sam.
Dry
Sam.
those big brown eyes, Sheriff. Fluff up the sofa and spread out some lamp for me to lay my poor bullet-ridden head on. In practically no time at all, I'll be staggering in to gasp out a humdrum report on the Kimberly Cross Caper. For NBC, William Spear, radio's outstanding producer, director of mystery and crime drama, brings you the greatest private detective of them all in The Adventures of Sam Spade. Hospital, milk. Have to break down your whole constitution, give you fits.
Sam?
Who else?
Oh, Sam. You look like the drummer man in the Spirit of 76.
Nothing. As you know, Angel, no profession is without its hazards, least of all this tawdry one of ours. Now, sit down now.
Oh, yes, Sam.
Now, may I put my poor wounded head in your lap?
Oh.
Comfy?
Oh, poor Sam.
They're stupid, too, honey. Let's see now. Hey, new filling. iTunes, huh? Date, fill it in to G.J. Runcible, Claims Manager, Sunset Indemnity Company, from Samuel Spade, license number 1375596. Subject, the Kimberly Cross Caper. Dear Mr. Runcible. It's just as well for private investigators that we have no way of knowing, by the way a job starts, how it's going to end. I remember once I went beating the bushes for a mad dog killer and ended up playing Monopoly with him in a hotel room for 6 hours. And I remember, too, the time I agreed to take a box of homemade candy to an old lady, wound up with a double murder and a case of arson. Yours, Mr. Runcible, belong to this species. Spade. G.J. Runcible, Sunset Indemnity. You available? Maybe. What'd you have? Are you or are you not available, Mr. Spade? Answer yes or no? Yes. Yes. How much? $50 a day? Expenses, right. I've got a job for you next 24 hours. All you got to do is sit on a chair and keep your eyes on something beautiful. Sounds keen. Might call it a babysitting job. Oh, who is she? Kimberly Cross. Pretty? Like $250,000. Oh, rich, too, huh? She's on exhibit at the Bergendorf Galleries on Sutter Street. She's on exhibit? Get over there right away. Well, I better. Check with Mr. Bergendorf personally and then see Johnny Stroud, our company man. He'll give you instructions. Fine. Now, why don't you tell me what we're... Hello? Hello?
Overdone.
Always happens on page 6.
Melbourne Ethnic Community Radio. Nothing.
في سيارة في ولاية واشنطن ليلة الاثنين. قال الرئيس التركي رجب طيب أردوغان إن سلطات بلاده هي من حولت آية.
China has been on Donald Trump's radar for some time. But either way, he would win in a way is the problem here.
You know, if the rule goes forward, he got what he wanted. If he doesn't go forward, he gets the schools reopened. Either way is drastic, because you've got these schools who have said, you know, we've been blindsided by this. They're working to block the rule because you've got 3.5 million COVID-19 cases in the United States. And, you know what, I don't even remember the death count. But, you know, the Trump administration has been looking to kick out Chinese grad students with ties to the military earlier this year. This is a continuation of that. And I just think right now, when you've got a day or two to determine whether your university curriculum is going to go online, lest you lose 1 million students, we got big problems here.
Yeah, it's definitely, well, Chinese overseas students are affected severely because there's a large number of them in the U.S., but also many other students from other countries. And also in the U.S., I'm wondering, like, what's the significance of having overseas students there? I mean, when you talk about, let's say, the biggest brands of the world that comes from the U.S., I saw this argument, which I find quite compelling, that is Apple, Microsoft, Facebook. These are not big brands or the biggest brands. You know, what's the biggest brand? It's Harvard. It's MIT. It's those educational institutions that people spend, how much would that be? $100 million US just to put their name on that building, and then their kids get into that school.
Ooh.
So that's what the biggest brand is. And now you're kind of suffering that for something else. And I'm just wondering, what's of significance here for US?
Well, in terms of talent, of course, they're not going to have as many talent that will, some of them may choose to stay and work and contribute to the economy and pay for bills there. But in terms of, well, the revenue for universities and colleges, I mean, we have to break it down according to the schools that we are talking about. I think prestigious schools like Harvard and MIT, I think they're okay. I mean, they got endowments, so they don't have to rely on international students to keep running. But the question would be for smaller universities, second tier, third tier. I mean, obviously, you guys don't mention schools in that sense. But yeah, I'm talking about smaller schools that are not as prestigious, that are maybe public schools, that maybe are receiving much less tuition from domestic students than they are from international students. Sometimes,
and that's a big point. That's a big point right there, because who cares if I'm a Korean student and I'm in the classroom, or I'm you know, full-time on the computer, I'm still paying the same tuition, I believe.
Yeah.
So what difference does it make? I mean, you know, worst case scenario, you still have the students who are tied to these universities, and everybody wins. I can't help but think there's just xenophobia at work here on the part of the Trump administration. And that's as far as I'll go with that. But also, you know, we're trying to crunch this into a 1 month period. I mean, schools are supposed to be back in session, if there were no COVID, by late August.
Yeah, but we've seen the decision to reopen has caused, well, research in the number of confirmed cases. I think mostly in Florida, is it? 15,000 confirmed cases last time we checked.
Yeah, in a single day. Yeah, that's the record. Did you know Florida, if it were a country, would rank number 4 in the world, behind the U.S., Brazil, India, and then Florida?
Wow.
As far as how bad it's gotten with COVID-19.
Yeah, and also the situation with COVID-19 is also affecting the decision on the part of Chinese students. I mean, they see what's going on there in the U.S. and how they are not even over the first wave yet, and how there's a huge rebound in the number of confirmed cases. I mean, they're thinking twice about whether or not they want to go to the United States and risk it all, their own lives, and yeah, that sort of thing. So they're looking. It's not like the UK is any better than this. I mean, we still remember that misguided belief in herd immunity, but nonetheless, there seems to be over the peak right now, and their economy is reopening.
It's not a real
whereas
thing, it's a theory.
in the United States, I mean, everything is up in the cloud. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here's a really tricky part of making the decision of future studies. That is, for a lot of families that are thinking to send their kid overseas to pursue another degree, they kind of need to make the planning at least a year ahead of time, sometimes a couple of years at a time. And for those Chinese families that put their kid in international schools, then at least 3 years ahead of time for the high school students. So we talked about those who are sort of already in the pipeline, but what about for the implication for the families that are considering in the next, like, let's say 3 years time or so, like where they're going to send their kids? Now they're really at this tricky crossroads.
Yeah.
Because how do you make that decision? Is it like if you put your kid in international school in 3 years' time, they might be caught in limbo just like the kids now that are struggling to go to their planned destinations?
Well, of course, there are many top universities in the United States, but that's not the only destination for international students. I mean, apart from the United Kingdom, there's also like Australia, Canada. They both account for 16% of Chinese international students outgoing. And then they are followed by Japan, Germany, and Singapore. And there has been a noticeable rise in students' eagerness to study in Japan and Singapore.
More Chinese people come to Canada than Japan.
Obviously, Asian countries are increasingly attractive due to similar cultural environments and also low cost and high value diplomas. Think about it. Yeah, if you were to study in, let's say, in Japan or Singapore, you get to fly home in what, 3 hours, 4 hours, 7 hours at most. But if you fly all the way to, let's say, Washington, D.C., 14 hours.
Yeah, but going to study in Japan, that would assume people would need to learn Japanese, right?
Yeah, instead of the English language.
Yeah, and in our curriculum here in China, then the first, second language people adopt is English.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's also a big decision. If you're going to, let's say, some of the European countries or Japan, and then maybe you need to learn another language, that kind of thing. But certainly the option is there, and then it's never been more salient for people who are thinking about this, that there are other options.
Well, it brings to mind what's going on with the United States and in Europe. And that was about a week ago. Europe effectively banned United States travelers, no American travelers to Europe for the rest of the year. I think they're enforcing it through December. I believe that includes foreign students from the United States. So there we've got. This seems to be happening. I mean, you know, one is more punitive. That's from the Trump administration side toward Asian and European and African students, and then you've
threat of removal.
Right, and then you've got what Europe is looking at, and they're saying, well, hey, you got 3.5 million coronavirus cases. We can't afford to have that imported here, despite the reason, politics or otherwise. This is a year where. You need a plan B, a plan C, and maybe a plan D. I don't know what to do. Well, you don't want those as grades. You may not be taking any tests. Online courses make sense. Why you would want to punish international students for this, I don't get it. This should be encouraged, and we're going to have our answer later today. A federal judge in Boston, Massachusetts, will have the call. They could very well say, hey, we're going to enforce the law as it exists, meaning we'll have to go ahead and deport.
And also just not returning into the classroom and have that in-class debate, you know, or being able to lay under the sun at the front lawn of a campus and not being able to sort of congregate with your fellow peers and have this on-campus experience. Is that going to affect not just international students, but just students altogether, whether they want to pursue higher education in this particular year?
I think it's going to be, it's going to leave an impact on students' psyche. I mean, there's certain sense of urgency that students feel when they're looking at their peers maybe busy getting a seat in the library so they can spend time there, or students trying to leave a book and then claim a spot for themselves in the classroom so they can study. So there's a sense of urgency that everybody is here, they're concentrating on their studies, and that feeling is obviously not so easily achieved if you were, let's say, a loner student staying at home and stuck with your parents all day. I mean, that's no way to study, in my opinion.
And parents are dreading it too. And also when you've got like a 18-year-old or a young adult just wandering around in your apartment, and when they could have, you know, gone elsewhere and do other stuff, and parents are still paying for the food and everything, then yeah, I think it's parental duties also to another level this year.
Yeah, it's also a challenge on the part of the teachers. I mean, they have to be disciplined. My wife, she's been conducting remote teaching for the past semester, and not surprisingly, she received good reviews from her students, because she was always paying attention as to who's checked in, who's doing all the homework, she teaches interpretation. She's making sure that everybody gets to practice during the live remote teaching course. So therefore, she got the respect from her students. I mean, she's paying attention.
Yeah.
But the same cannot be said with other teachers, and this is precisely why she got the highest reviews. So I'm just pointing the difficulties on the part of the teachers. And they have to get used to this remote teaching thing. They have to make sure that their students are paying attention, whereas maybe normally they simply have to show up and engage the students. But doing this over the internet is somewhat different.
Yeah, and also what a big challenge it is to the not so tech savvy. I don't want to necessarily highlight the factor age, but some of the older professors, it's such a struggle for them to migrate online and give these classes, and well, first of all, to facilitate them, second of all, to make them interesting in front of a camera. And this is definitely just a really difficult time for everybody. And then we see that with some of these visa policies, and then the court ruling that is happening possibly right now, and then some of the other developments of things, it's just not made the situation any easier. And with the pandemic, do you think that this is going to have an effect on students' sort of long-term decisions when it comes to studying in another country?
Yeah, I mean, it will, based on a couple of things that lay before us, or the court ruling in the United States and the COVID-19 pandemic, pending all that stuff. It's going to be difficult. I think people should still have the goal and still be oriented toward studying abroad. We know how culturally relevant that is, and how important it is just to how we perceive other people and our understanding. It enriches our experience to go elsewhere, right?
Oh, can I just, quickly jump in and ask you a question? Because, well, America and the UK, these are countries that are well known, having their cultural export, and the biggest one would be their education. What do local people see in, let's say, overseas students? I mean, from the overseas students' perspective, it's kind of easy to understand. Okay, you come in, you study, you experience a different culture, get a degree in a different language, and just fresh things you're taking in and all that. But what about for the local people? How do you perceive these students that are coming from a different country and pursuing studies there?
That's a good question. I guess there's the school of thought that some people might think, well, if an international student is coming, that takes up a spot that my son could occupy. There's that. There's also the other side of that, that's we should be welcoming. We're the land of opportunity. We're a nation built on immigrants. Okay, we all were descended from immigrants. So, and that's not to say that foreign exchange students are immigrants. They're not. They're visiting, and we'd be lucky to have them. And we're going to be severely unlucky not to have them. I think overall that people appreciate the value of the curiosity that people from outside the United States have, and that they want to pursue something in America is great. And right now we're seeing a lot of that enthusiasm falling by the wayside.
And we're seeing actually figures from the UK actually show that just during the pandemic, because of a drop in international students number, some universities had to close doors, and the IELTS examination, which is the exam you have to take in order to go to the UK to study, is only recently resumed in China, and computer-delivered test centers, that's something in play now. So that's the latest. But Lai Ming, do you have something to add on, or I have another question for you, actually.
Well, just circle back your earlier question, whether students should make any long-term plan with regard to studying overseas. I think there's a lot more uncertainties, even when we have a COVID-19 vaccine, because given the tendency for the current administration to politicize everything, like 5G and Huawei, there's no guarantee that they wouldn't politicize the issue of a vaccine. Will international students be required to pay for and take a U.S. vaccine, even if they already taken the Chinese vaccine? I'm not sure. I'm just posing this possibility.
So much is just up in the air right now.
You should be so lucky to have a vaccine right now. But I definitely take your point.
Yes, well, we all would like to see the vaccine to come about sooner than later. But also, let me have a question for you about the decisions of these Chinese students. Is it going to be simply an increase in numbers of people deciding, forget about it, studying overseas, I'm just gonna pursue my education here in China, and that includes higher education?
Well, like I said earlier, there are other destinations, UK, Canada, Australia. So there's currently no prohibition on them from going to these destinations. And as for staying here in China to study, I think you mentioned earlier that students, they have to follow a different track of education. I mean, a lot of the textbooks are different from in international schools than in public schools. So they're going to face a difficult time in changing gear and then switching to a different lane. I doubt they will be very competitive in the Gaokao system if they were choosing to stay here.
Well, that is a really good point, because if you go to an international school, or if you're studying for a course that's geared towards taking the SAT in the US or the A-levels in the UK, just to take a couple of examples, then, the textbook is completely different. The curriculum is completely different. You not be studying, so much about Chinese history, for example. So that would just be really complicated for all those families and also young people who are contemplating all of this. But I guess with a lot of research and there's also guessing that's happening, then I hope people can make the best decision that's for yourself or for your kid. And we'll be back after this break with more roundtable discussion.
Looking for passion? How about fiery debate? Want to hear about current events in China from different perspectives? Then tune in to Roundtable.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Roundtable, coming to you live from Beijing.
Roundtable.
Roundtable. Connecting China and the world.
We bring you fun and timely discussions about what's affecting our lives everywhere, every day.
Tune in to Roundtable, where the East meets the West, and understanding is the goal.
How are you? What's on your mind? Let's have a heart-to-heart on Roundtable. Ask us anything. We'll help you answer it. Send a voice memo to ezfmroundtable@foxmail.com. We'll play your question on Roundtable, then talk through it on the live show. Take care. We can't wait for our heart-to-heart with you.
Informed opinion and heated debate. Find out what's got China talking and join us for your roundtable discussion.
You're listening to Roundtable with myself, Young, joined by Ling and Patrick Flannery in the studio. Coming up, China is facing a critical period for flood control with strong and sustained rainfall expected in the coming weeks and more than 38 million people already affected. What's been done to contain the flooding, and why are Americans turning to chocolate during the COVID-19 pandemic? Guess what Chinese people are turning to?
What?
It's not something sweet. Let's just put it that way.
Ooh. Sour?
Spicy.
Spicy, yes, indeed. Okay,
Yeah, well,
spice is good?
I guess so, but during a pandemic, what are the kind of foods that people turn to? What are the new food trends, and what does it say about our state of mind and our conduct in life? We'll get deep into it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, at Roundtable China, and our Qingfeng Tiaobin app. And if you have a question, we're here to answer it. Please send a voice memo or email to ezfmroundtable@foxmail.com. We will air your question first on the live show and then give you a reply. And now on Roundtable, as we continue our discussion. Since June, continuous downpours have ravaged large parts of southern China, and the waters of many rivers in the affected regions exceeded warning levels. According to Ye Jianchun, Vice Minister of Water Resources, at a press conference Monday, 433 rivers in China have exceeded alert levels in this period, with 109 above their flood lines and 33 at historic highs. Leming, please give us an update on the flooding situation in this country.
Well, floods are now affecting over 38 million people across 27 provincial level regions, having destroyed 29,000 homes and resulted in 141 people dying or going missing. One of the most heavily hit provinces, Jiangxi, in eastern China, that's my hometown, has gone into wartime mode after suffering its strongest floods recorded this century, which has killed 4 people and caused 405,000 more to be evacuated, according to the provincial government. And before dawn on Sunday, Poyang Lake, the largest freshwater lake in China, saw its water level exceed 22.52 meters, the highest point previously recorded over 20 years ago. And of the province's more than 2,500 kilometers of embankment, 88% exceeded alert levels, and one section of a dike protecting human settlements from flooding collapsed under pressure, according to state media. And here's one term that I'd like to clarify. When we talk about water level, and we see figures like 22.52 meters or 29, the historical high, and we feel like, whoa, this is really high. This is like several stories of building high. Mm-hmm. But that's a technical term. It refers to the altitude of the water level. So in case where I think in the city of Wuhan, we're looking at water levels about 28 plus meters. But nonetheless, the city itself was about 24 meters. So we were expecting a shortfall 4 meters right now. So it's not too bad. So it's important not to panic when we're looking at these figures.
Okay, well, that's an interesting and also useful explanation there. Mm-hmm. And yes, when we talk about flooding season, America is no stranger to that.
Right.
And also, just right before the show, I learned something about hurricane season.
Yes, we are in the thick of hurricane season, Atlantic hurricane season in the United States.
What is it? Is it rather common in the U.S.?
Oh,
How do people perceive it and react to it?
It runs every year from June through November.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
And my gosh, my first taste of a hurricane, I must have been around 8 or 9 years old, and it's quite frightening. I mean, you know, these form off the coast of the United States, conflicting storms. You get wind, rain, you know it, and it just stampedes. Sometimes into land and then up the coastline or what have you. These are unpredictable storms. Term, I mean, weathermen can only do so much, right? You know, here's what they call the cone of uncertainty, I believe it was. and I used to live in Florida and work for a TV station. I would cover some of these things. I mean, you're in drenching rain. It's dangerous. And depending on the severity of these things, you would call it a category 1 up to a 5. 5 is the most severe. I believe Katrina, almost 15 years ago, I can't believe it. I'm not quite sure if it managed level 5, but it was, if not the deadliest, one of the most deadliest in United States history. And I believe it did kill the most people. But right now, climate experts, scientists are predicting as many as 19 named storms this year. What's a named storm? It'll be Tropical Storm Faye.
The storm with the name,
the letters of the alphabet
Dick
each year.
Weevil.
Starts with A, goes past Z. One year it went into beta, or alpha letters. The Greek alphabet.
Yeah.
Yeah, no joke. That
Whoa,
really
that's a
happened.
lot then.
That's a lot. And Tropical Storm Faye is number 6. That's formed off the coast of my home state of North Carolina, not far from my parents. And so experts are saying this is going to be a pretty bad season. It's already ahead of pace. There'll be probably 10 hurricanes. Where they end up, we don't know. What sort of extent of damage, we don't know. But FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Agency, which deals with emergency preparedness and also the response post-storm, they're very worried. They're already stretched thin with budgets and staff, but now we've got COVID-19. Why does that matter? Well, think about it. You have what's called hurricane shelters. You typically are ordered to evacuate by your local or state officials. You're put under a state of emergency and then have to start planning of, okay, let's get our go bag, let's get our kids, let's go. And often you can go seek refuge in what's known as a hurricane shelter. But now, are we going to have COVID-19 only shelters? These are questions that emergency responders are already trying to prepare for, and they just don't quite have the answer.
Yeah, do they hand out masks at the entrance so that everybody has masks when they're in shelters?
Yeah, the U.S. hasn't been faced with a severe storm this year, but they are predicting that they're going to get them because they usually do. And, they've never had to also think about a pandemic and the fact that people are already on edge, and stress certainly doesn't help.
Definitely. And also when you've got a natural disaster, or like severe flooding we're seeing here in parts of China, what are some of the measures that are being taken right now? As we've seen, this has been going on for a bit, for like about a month already, when it comes to torrential rain.
Well, we just heard from the hourly news that the Chinese authorities are diverting funds to regional governments to help with the alleviation project, and a lot of what they do is building encampments near the rivers. So embankments, I'm sorry, so encampment is a different word. But embankments, they're trying to prop up the riverbanks so that they don't falter when there are a higher level of water going through. But this is only short term. I think over the long term, a lot of the funds went into making sure that the Yangtze River as a whole is safe, and so that means front and foremost, we built this 3 water stand to beef up the conservancy capacity so that we are looking at 175 meter threshold. So the dam is able to hold 175 meter water. So in flooding seasons, and right now we are about 150 something. So there's still room for that. And also in the river regions, like the big cities like Wuhan and other cides, they built parks and conservancy areas, so that when it gets bad, there's room for the water to go without going into the cities to flood the homes of people. So that's what they do. And I think actually here in Beijing, somewhere near where I live, there's a park that actually is a conservancy. So it's a reservoir kind of thing. And so in dire situations, flood will be diverted there. So that's what they're doing. It's precisely because of this long-term investment into infrastructure that currently, even though the city of Wuhan is looking at, historically number 3 highest level water levels right now. They're still safe. We haven't sending the PLA soldiers to man the dams, or the embankments. So overall, in the city of Wuhan, that's okay. I mean, I think I can breathe some kind of a sigh of relief looking at the situation in Wuhan, because we don't really want it to go through a double whammy situation right after the COVID-19 ravaged the city. But on the other hand, even though the Yangtze River region as a whole is okay because of these long-term investment, there are shortfalls in smaller rivers, and middle and smaller rivers, and that's what we have in the Poyang Lake area. I mean, that's my hometown, although a bit distant from my actual hometown. So that what we have there is they did something after the 1998 flooding, namely they were they were trying to remove some kind of land reclamation projects. Well, the lower reaches of Yangtze River and Poyang Lake is a hugely densely populated area, and therefore people needed the land to grow produce and grains, and therefore historically there's been some kind of land reclamation project taking up the room or the space from the Poyang Lake. And therefore, after the 1998 flood, there were some measures trying to convince the local people to either move away from the land and also return the land to the sea. I don't know, to the lake, or some of them they just moved the people away, but they're still leaving the farms there. Right now, we're looking at some of these areas where they are still doing farming, and that they're being hit pretty hard.
Yeah, this just reminds me of the simple but old saying, where there is a river, there is a city, and this is a constant struggle we see in history in various parts of the globe. That is, near the river, near water, there's fertile land. It makes so much sense to build a city there, but with flooding happening, then people, human lives, and their assets, and all the things that we've built for ourselves, I mean, that comes into jeopardy. And then it's like a constant, when you read history, it's almost like a constant struggle of sustaining life and achieving prosper.
Well, that is true, but we're also seeing new challenges coming in this century. We're talking about climate change these days, and the reason why we are having severe flooding this year in southern China is precisely because there are some weather anomalies in the Pacific Ocean, and that's what I read. That's what I read. But judging from the tendency or the development of the flood in southern China, I guess there's something going on in the Indian Ocean as well. Because initially, I think in the month of June, maybe before that, the raining, incessant rain, and also flooding mostly occurred in southwest China, so like Guangxi province, Guangxi autonomous region, and then in Guizhou province. And then over time, we see the rain and flooding gradually move northeast. So now we're talking about the areas in Hubei, in Anhui, and in Jiangxi province that are being hit hard. So and then obviously these parts of the country, they are affected by what's going on in the Pacific Ocean. So I wonder whether this is a global thing, because Patrick earlier here just mentioned some changes in the Atlantic Ocean. And you were explaining the cyclone season in the United States. So I'm not sure whether this is a global thing. I mean, we certainly need more information on the Western European part.
Well, there's no doubt that climate change is affecting everything around us, and that COVID-19 is only just adding to the health threat that's facing this world. You know, when you have these global pacts, you know, it seems like it's the only thing that gets kicked down the road is our sustainability goals and our efforts to sort of combat climate change. And it just doesn't seem like the concrete plan is ever developed. There are summits, there are get-togethers, there are little fireside chats with countries, but you sense that it's just going nowhere fast. And we're reaping that now. We're reaping what we've sown.
Well, certainly we're seeing that there's abnormal weather and natural disasters that are happening in various parts of the world. And with this kind of torrential rain that lasts so long in China, I mean, this is affecting the lives of so many people. And also when, well, it becomes sometimes a really tough choice, because when so many regions are hit, and we saw that in the news here in China that for some of the smaller regions, let's say in rural areas, when a lot of the young, the stronger folks are miles, hundreds, thousands of miles away from home and working in a different city, and then this happens in their hometown or home village, and then some of the local officials were sending out announcements asking, pleading people to come back to sort of save your hometown kind of thing, because you also need manpower to do all this very difficult work, and it's an emergency.
Yeah, when you're building embankment, you essentially get a bag of dirt and you pile them up along the banks. I mean, that's what you do. And you also have people, you also need to have people constantly on patrol, because you know, these bags, they hold dirt, but nonetheless, when they're soaking water and they're constantly washed, and so some of the dirt might be washed away, and therefore the encampment could collapse. And that's what happened in 1998 when we had PLA soldiers called in to man the dams, and they're really guarding the dams with their lives. And so it's a labor-intensive job, and you have to dig the dirt, you have to put them in bags, you have to transport them, you have to make sure they don't collapse.
If the dikes kept falling down,
it takes a lot of manpower.
We wouldn't be
Definitely. And also, you guys have mentioned, and I'll just highlight it again, that we've also got a global pandemic that's happening. And a lot of the times with flooding, for example, once it goes away, it becomes high season for contagious disease. And
good point.
I don't...
A breeding ground of other
things we don't like. Yeah. So I don't think we necessarily have a solution here, but do you think there are some of the things that maybe we need to be aware of or you know, alerted of?
I tend not to worry about these things. I mean, I know we've been through COVID-19, and it's precisely because of that people are more aware of the situation. And then there's also, I think last year we had the African swine flu, or swine influenza. It was a swine fever, I'm sorry. So that was a pretty serious situation. And in southern China, pretty much a lot of people in the profession of livestock farming, they were pretty much aware of this situation. So I will be more concerned with the economic loss. I mean, buildings being demolished by the flood, and then perhaps livestock being washed away and people being washed away. I'll be more concerned with this than the aftermath of maybe a possible kind of infectious disease taking over.
Any last thoughts that you would share with us, Patrick?
Oh my gosh, I'm looking forward to talking about this junk food thing, because I tell you, I mean, nothing really gets me chipper than talking about devastating floods and you know, worldwide collapse.
But I do have one more thing before we go. I mean, certainly there's been a sad case where a 10-year-old boy was somewhat electrocuted and then drowned in a flooded situation. So when you're in a city environment, when you see floods in the city, make sure you take extra care when you're walking and when you're treading water. Don't go anywhere near the electric pole, that sort of thing. So be careful.
Yeah,
look out for each other.
Yes, lend a helping hand when you can. You're listening to Roundtable. Coming up next, Nelson Data suggests that Americans are craving more chocolate during the pandemic than ever. Stick around, everybody, to find out more on that.
Looking for passion? How about fiery debate? Want to hear about current events in China from different perspectives? Then tune in to Roundtable. East meets West. Understanding is the goal.
It's the hour of Roundtable with myself, He Young, Liming, and Patrick Flannery in the studio. Early in the pandemic, Americans stocked up on junk food, frozen meals, and various breakfast cereals. Now, data indicates that chocolate was also top of mind throughout stay-at-home orders and that ease into reopening the economy in places. So, Americans love chocolate, right? And they're buying them.
Americans love to eat.
4 times since then.
And they're buying them now.
Yeah, this is really something, this story. Okay, so during COVID lockdown in the United States, and Nielsen tracks a lot of this information, it turns out that people were spending $4 billion on chocolate, which is up about 6 or 7% in the same period last year. And they tracked the period from the beginning of, call it February, March, beginning of this thing, through June. So, you know, it's 2 weeks old, this report, and I have no doubt that
$1 billion
chocolate has spiked yet again.
a month, basically.
What do you think the number one type of chocolate is the favorite?
The super sweet type.
Well, milk chocolate, for whatever reason.
That's a lie.
I always prefer dark, but what do I know?
I love milk.
You do?
Yeah,
because it's sweet. I mean, nothing makes people happy than
milk chocolate,
milk sugar.
Well, clearly that's the case in the United States. So, okay, so Mars Wrigley, which owns Snickers and M&M's, they're saying that people are not only buying more product, they're buying bigger bags. They're buying the family-sized bags. People are stocking up in the United States for a lot of things. And it seems that they were surveyed, about 40% of families reported that they had at least 3 types of what you would call junk or snack food, comfort food in their pantries. There's a little bit of that thing of, okay, we're in lockdown, let's just get whatever we want and put it in the house, and then we'll just try to police ourselves as we eat. We know how we are, though. And a lot of us have been given to bad habits and are now only starting to realize, hey, probably time to buy that pair of tennis shoes and go outside, as we discussed last week. I love how running shoes are also up as chocolate sales are up. And by the way, everything in moderation. But meanwhile, in the UK,
a little bit of opium.
Supermarkets are set to remove chocolate from their displays at the stores. There's a big campaign throughout the UK to try to eat healthier.
Even during the pandemic.
Especially during the pandemic. And they say the sales of chocolate have
completely
plummeted in Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Stay home.
But we're chocolate crazy in the States.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, this is all coronavirus figures.
So, he knows everything.
Do you think possibly that, you know, during the pandemic, maybe we're reaching for some comfort food or whatever that makes us feel good?
Yeah.
But I mean, just to take the UK and US as examples, they have, you know, opposing consumer behavior.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about alcohol consumption. I haven't looked up those figures. I thought, you know what, let's stay with one vice for the day. I'm gonna go ahead and assume the UK is probably outdoing Americans on the alcohol, but I could be way wrong. Apologies to all my UK friends.
What about here in China? What's the vice for us?
I would assume it's hot pot. I mean, I don't have any paper to prove this, but I think hot pot is on everybody's menu when they're isolating alone at home. Because in my home, we had hot pot multiple times, even when we were not allowed to go out. I mean, we had those broth or packaged broth delivered to our doorstep, and then we just cooked hot pot at home. Also, I think there's kind of a certain kind of thrill to eat junk food in the middle. I remember risking it and walking outside the community to a nearby McDonald's to get chicken burgers.
Yeah.
And I did this 2 days in a row until I had diarrhea. And
wow!
And then we thought it was worth it.
Wow!
Yeah.
It's kind of
wow.
I was engaged in sin.
You're a white American guy. You had.
Well, yeah, and you bring up a good point.
So I got diarrhea.
Wow! But I think the better point was, you know, well, first of all, this stuff is addictive. If you have fast food on Monday, you're going to want it on Tuesday. That's because there's sugar in this, and there's all kinds of toxic stuff that pulls us in further.
Magic in a big
chocolate's a beautiful thing, and I would consider it a rare treat. Once in a while, I like a taste of it, but to be buying it in just piles by the ton, it does say something about immediate, instant gratification. And maybe in America right now, since the pandemic numbers are so high, lockdown has been going on for so much longer than anywhere else in the world, you can sort of let them off the hook as far as they want to indulge in a vice a little bit longer because, hey, I'm at home, I'm stressed, I got to be on Zoom for this office meeting, I got nowhere to go, there's no bar, let me get a chocolate bar.
Ah.
Hey,
nice
wordplay for you.
Nice one. I wonder if that has something to do with just economic value, but just with the bigger packets, then it's usually cheaper. But also, everything is just plus size in the U.S. compared with European folks or what we have here in China.
Yeah.
And if you compare it with what we have here in China, usually it's like sweeter than what we get here.
None of us should be buying snacks in bulk, I guess, right? That's probably one thing that shouldn't be even available in such a thing. But it's easy, it's cheap to make, there's a high markup on it, it's addictive. End of story.
Well, what about the emotional aspect of things? Do you think that a lot of it is that we need that emotional comfort, or we're reaching for that now when so much in life just seems so uncertain?
Well, that's it. Yeah, you summed it up. I mean, that's why they call it comfort food. You seek almost a not safety, but what's the word? Not comfort, not safety.
Comfort.
Maybe it is
consolation.
Yeah, something like that. Like just almost something familial or nostalgic. Thank you. That's it. Take me back to a more innocent time. Snickers bar or what? Apple pie, whatever it is, And if you are around family and you're able to you're kind of aiding and abetting each other when it comes to junk food, you can see why sales have spiked considerably in the last 5 months.
I also think whether this has anything to do with the fact that people are not dining outside. And so maybe you see my family, there's this belief that we're already not dining outside, we're already eating healthy, so what's wrong with eating something a little bit of a junk food?
Right.
So maybe no harm.
Until you go overboard.
Everything in moderation, as my grandfather used to say.
Well, there's no guarantee that they're eating them all.
My grandfather used to eat the saltiest Dutch licorice.
It's very interesting because it's really easy to engage in while watching a show, and
you could have lived forever.
You finish up the whole big fat packet,
beyond what the average
and end up plus size after the pandemic, and that just happened without you even checking, and that could happen. And but also, like, some people have been very good on themselves in self-policing or whatever you call it, that maybe you can just take one piece or two pieces out of the packet.
What's your favorite junk food? Tell us, we're running out of time. I want to know what it is.
Bye, guys. I will tell you next time. How's that?
One piece of chocolate a day.
Bye.
One piece of chocolate at a time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Round Table, coming to you live from Beijing.
Round Table.
There's something wrong with that machine, Louis. It's an instrument of murder. Turn that gas off.
Who's in this tent?
The Avenger is here as an invisible witness against you, Louis.
The Avenger? What good an invisible witness?
As good as the evidence he can produce.
What evidence?
That balloon inflating tank you have there.
Death in midair.
All the state will need to prove your crimes against you.
Take the...
It sucks too. What the fuck is going on?
Bits of news, your window on China and the world.
Are required to stop buying 5G equipment from
the competitive advantage that the UK had by releasing the spectrum early and early adopters will be lost by this announcement.
China's National Observatory has issued a new alert for rainstorms. And the UN's warned that COVID-19 could set back years or even decades of economic progress. In business, U.S. markets rally on strength in the energy sector. In sports, the Chinese Super League has released a shortened schedule for the football season. In culture and entertainment, a film about China's hunt for economic fugitives. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Beijing Hour. 60 minutes of comprehensive news. Your window on China and the world.
Welcome back. Now the day's top stories. Tech firm Huawei has expressed disappointment after the British government decided to prohibit it from working on the country's 5G system. Telecom operators are required to stop buying 5G equipment from Huawei after the end of this year and remove all Huawei equipment from Britain's 5G network by the end of 2027. Vice President Jeremy Thompson of Huawei UK says the decision means the country will lose its competitive edge in launching a 5G network.
5G is not like the previous generations. It's what the next industrial revolution is going to be built on.
I don't believe
we feel that the competitive advantage
that we already
UK had by releasing the spectrum early and
probably were used
early
in the
adopters
design of these phones
will be lost by this announcement.
The decision marks a major retreat for Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who in January agreed to give Huawei a limited role in the 5G network. Under the earlier ruling, Huawei would have been limited to providing 35% of equipment, such as radios and antennas, while being barred from supplying core components of the system. But that move set up a diplomatic clash with the United States, which has accused Huawei of spying and threatened to cut off security cooperation unless Britain dumped Huawei. However, Thompson has denied this is the case, the allegations, suggesting the real motivation was to protect American jobs. And for more on the UK's ban on Huawei, Huang Yue spoke to Martina Fuchs, a business analyst based in London and Zurich.
What's your take on the ban on Huawei?
It's a huge blow for Huawei and consumers here in the UK. This landmark decision will delay the rollout of the 5G network in the country by probably 2 to 3 years and hit mobile users very hard. They will now have to wait longer to get much faster data and increased capacity. As you know, 5G is the successor to 4G and the latest generation of wireless network technology. Experts say it could be between 10 and 100 times faster for consumers. Now, UK operators have been given until 2027 to remove existing Huawei equipment from their 5G networks, but telecom giants like BT and Vodafone have already warned that customers could face higher bills and signal blackouts if they were forced to remove all of Huawei's 5G gear in less time. There is also the additional cost, of course, of delaying deployment, as companies have already gone through the process of testing 5G equipment from Huawei, and this whole process, including the testing, will now have to be started all over again. This will also mean a more expensive network for the UK and mobile users here in the country, and a delay that could result in Britain's national infrastructure being inferior compared to other countries, mainly in the European Union.
Well, what impact can we expect from the decision on the UK and Huawei respectively?
Hanging up on Huawei has far-reaching ramifications. The UK's digital and culture minister admitted that the decision would mean a delay to the rollout of 5G by...
Stop. That on the front looks like I scratched it and I didn't bleed all those red spots on my register. I must have if I use it. Except to run it down. Die.
Go back. Yeah.
For fucking.
I should be getting from all the pills I took, but I'll be okay. Raise your hands if you're going insane. If you're feeling so depressed you want to blow out your brains, and you've been to darker places you won't try to explain, but still you're trying to keep them.
UI isn't responding. Bullshit. The fuck? I don't care anymore. No, system, you figure it out. You figure it out, system. Close app or wait. If I close app, shouldn't the whole computer crash? System UI, not just UI. Like the UI doesn't bad.
Woke up and I said, fuck this shit. I made a promise to myself, man, grip shit. And smile to your verse like a Tokyo drift kid. From being at the doctor's on pills like, please help me, to being on the hospital floor like, please kill me. And I ain't scared of dying except there's nothing to inherit. And I owe lots of people money, including my parents. I'm trying to set the right, but I have mental interference. Cause I got inner demons that are screaming out my lyric. And I'm new.
Shit. Y'all gonna learn, man.
My feet going rock climbing. All these niggas saying they rocked up, boy, none of them ain't got diamonds. Right, they not riding. Only thing I'm ducking is a cop siren. I'm out driving, going across an island, till I find hide about 5 hydrant. I'm not lying, so stop trying. Why the fuck is you lying? Damn, look like you back at it again. But them ways that you look like the why still ride. These drum ass. Lord have mercy, y'all, these niggas sound like ragamuffins. Mac, daddy, man, I can't have them jumping. Forget a shock attack like one-on-one with Duncan. A crossover layer, maybe I might just go with Duncan. Bodies on top of bodies, I had a cops punkin', they pulling up in no foot. American muscle that foot. Let's take it back to that raw. 10 minutes to that store. The big find out the number 4. When the number show, that's 100 more. I got 100 cars on the daily boy for the rugged raw with a lion's paw. Lion's claw for my Iron King. I got an iron paw with a press niggas. I am a god. You niggas soft like why? You niggas want trying to fall for now. My niggas are spinal course like dinosaurs playing Diana Ross. They get my body across like an arrow does. Beware of us. New Toronto, we're old Toronto. Say shit. Nah, just keep 6, cause 6 up whenever Drake snitch. New Toronto, we're old Toronto, same shit. Nah, just keep 6, cause 6 up whenever Drake snitch.
What's the system UI crash? It shows me the way I'm like, why would you not just crash instead of...
I'm on the paper repetitively, still I'm dreaming. I'm feeling like a diamond in the rough, still gleaming. I can see you feeding for it, but you notice what the deal is. The real is to do it, so don't deny it. You feel it, I kill it every time. With a militant mind, I drop bombs when I rhyme. You can feel it on the front line, prime time lyricist. Yeah, I've been killing this. I do it for the love, and you can feel the thrill of it. Despite it all, I'm on the road, on the high grade, doing 100 down the highway, sitting sideways on the road, smoking on the coast by the ocean. Imagine if I put it all in the open. You don't want me air it out though. Nah, you don't want it with me feeling like the man of the year. So let me paint the perfect picture clear so you can visualize it. I'm on another level, so don't try to despise it unless you realize it. The dream I'm visualizing is one of a kind. That's why I'm rising above the occasion. Embracing the fact I'm First Nation, replacing everything you hate with what you loved of. That's just what it is, and this is how it goes. I came up from the low and now you feel me now. So shout out to the person that I used to be, cause truthfully I came up from the bottom, now I'm on top. Murdering these MCs, homicide is not stop. I make beats and I rap to them, ready for war, you know what it is, you feel me now. I'm feeling like the man now, cause I ain't never looking back no more. Got me focused on the plan now, cause in my mind I'm ready for war. In my mind I'm ready. In my mind I'm ready for war. In my mind I'm ready. In my mind I'm ready for war. And then let's go.
6 spinner on a mission for 6 figures. The first thing on my list. Get my dick bigger, so when I fuck the world, I find it hard to fit it in. A life's a bitch, and I'm a fucking idiot for sticking with her. Get the picture. There will never be anybody better than me. Incredible as ever shredded Benny MC. Brain matter was scattered all over the baddest to messing with me. Take a second and listen, I got a lesson to teach. Been away, but now I'm here with no material to show these shitty rappers what I'm here to do. Start to spit some other shit. I can smell the fear in you. You ain't tough with all you crew missing, stitching like a stool pigeon. Getting riches is the new mission. Need the money, need the pussy. Treat it like a new addiction. Fuck with all the shit that you've been spitting, all the shit that you've been talking. Shove it back in your heart. It's not the dopest rapper you know. In the back of the leg, pimp slapping a hoe. I told the bitch to stop with all the diva shit. Nothing for me to beat her in front of people. The weeding inside of the Peter pit. I'm a piece of shit. Even if they see me and call the police, I plead the fifth. Not one for dry stitching. I'm drunk, my mind's missing. Sipping rum with 9 bitches. They not done till I'm finished. Not a bad guy, just made some bad decisions. Now it's back to business. Trying to rest for riches. Make the cash and split it with the homies. Hope I ain't the last to get it. Got a rhyme book, but half of it's nothing but half finished it. Suicidal psychopath. You can try to write the rappers, haters that, but you and I know I'm the man. Now tell me where my rifle at. About to take the title back. Puddle of blood with no pulse. Where your vitals at?
Feeling like the man now, 'cause I ain't never looking back no more. Got me focused on the plan now, 'cause in my mind I'm ready for war. In my mind I'm ready. In my mind I'm ready for war. In my mind I'm ready. In my mind I'm ready for war. Now let's go.
I'm from the West End. Nigga, what you saying? I'm from the West End. I'm from the West End. Yo, I'm coming straight from the West End. Move from the Jane to the West End. Watch how you talk when you walk through my hood, 'cause you know that my niggas be pressed in. Heavy artillery weapons. Ain't really into the questions. I ain't condoning no violence. These youngins are wildin', they move kind of reckless. Got the keys,
There's a swarm of motorcycles. Little
keys, police, stay patting niggas, stay cheese. I'm familiar face taxing nigga, safety. Didn't even wanna slap the nigga, he made me. Ain't nobody telling me nothing. I knew from a youngin' that I be the one I hit something. Now all of these rappers is bugging. You live in the birds and you act like you came up from nothing. Shout out to my niggas on the plaza. Lane to connection, Southside Gaza. When I roll my backwood, better house robber. Never leave that house without my iPhone charger. Wallahi, my Molly's a rocker. Abdi Muhammad Mustafa. African man, that's my barber. Jamaican man, that's my shopper. Tell him the truth. Tell him the truth. These rappers, they in the booth. Lie in the booth. What's then got the realest? Just look at the proof. I'm living proof. The city's so litty 'cause we got the juice. We got the juice. So we got the juice, nigga. I'm from the West End. I'm from the West End. Nigga, what you saying? I'm from the West End. I'm from the West End. Nigga, what you saying? Been strict, jungle to the Rex we deep. I can tell a West End nigga by the way you speak, Birds chirping loud in the hood, always lose they beaks. Know that shotty with bodies got dumped in the creek. Stop, freeze, what I mean looking for me. The chick I got that degree, what do you mean? Bitch, you don't know what I seen. Bitch, you ain't been on the scene. Record is clean, I'm too wavy. Make cause you may wanna date me. I got the sauce, gravy. More than they cannot replace me. Cause I'm from the West End. Bitch, nigga, better watch that top. When you find out you top to the cops, go when it turn hot on your block. I'm from the West End. So you claim you a bad man, but gal, what a bad gal crew. Let me show you what a bad gal do. Bet you didn't know that. I'm from the West End. I'm from the West End. Nigga, what you saying? I'm from the West End. I'm from the West End. Nigga, what you saying?
You got a key? You got a car, nigga? Where's your car? What's your keys for? You don't need those. Give me those. We suggest.
All I have in this world is my thoughts and my word, and I don't break them for no one. You understand?
I just had a premonition last night. That's when I started reminiscing last night. All your homies stabbed me in my back twice. That's the choice you're making, that's the price you fucking pay. Like, I just had a premonition last night. That's when I started reminiscing last night. All your homies stabbed me in my back twice. That's the choice you're making, that's the price you fucking pay. Like this, that, doing donuts in the lot. Don't stop at a red light, stop. Walking flop, gonna flop. Jabber walk, gonna cop. On the cell with the fuck, with the fuck, with the fuck. Is it real? I don't know. Going ham in the yeah. What you saying? What you saying? Straight back to the pretty big bucks I'm only with. I'm a real better this another one piece of shit. I just had a premonition last night. I just had a premonition last night. That's when I started reminiscing last night. All your homies stabbed me in my back twice. That's the choice you're making. That's the price you fucking pay. Like, I just had a premonition last night. That's when I started reminiscing last night. All your homies stabbed me in my back twice. That's the choice you're making. That's the price you fucking pay. Like. Elevated like a crop rate, it's full of hate. If you really think that you better than the devil, then you gotta get a separate fate. When I'm rip off my shit, people that just send me anything for bad. Well, you get fucking up country and that, and then you get clapped the crack, and then you don't know what the fuck happened. You're just like flat. You don't even see past my identity, which be the DERELICT MC of the Avenue E. Fuck wanna be, stay hating on me because I am better than fucking competitor. I say whatever, you bitches can lay the phone down. My crew is tough, just like some others who cook stuff. What are you saying? You're buffing your name off in your rhymes. Fuck around once more and you're gonna find that I shit the knife up in your spine. Murderous mind is something to love because it makes me driven to lust. And when I do murder, you trust me, and it's just because I want your flesh. Radio Copie.
Manifestations dispersées dans plusieurs points du pays ce lundi. De nouvelles manifestations appelées par la plateforme politique Lamouka pour protester contre l'entérinement par l'Assemblée nationale de Ronsard Malonda comme président de la CENI. Déconfinement de la province du Sud Kivu, le comité provincial de riposte dit préparer un plan pour la reprise prochaine des activités économiques dans la province. L'invité de la rédaction ce soir, c'est Ivano Cachez-moi, médecin congolais résident à Bukavu. Il a remporté vendredi aux États-Unis le prix d'une étude consacrée aux conséquences du VIH/SIDA sur les personnes victimes des viols. Bonjour et bon début de semaine à tous. Marche pacifique de la coalition Lamuka à Kinshasa pour dire non à la désignation de Ronsard Malonda à la tête de la CENI. La police s'est interposée pour limiter cette manifestation au niveau de l'échangeur de l'IMT. En effet, une foule immense avec à sa tête Jean-Pierre Bemba, l'un des leaders de Lamuka, qui a quitté la place Pascal à la Tchangou, a été stoppé à l'entrée de la commune de l'IMT. Toutes les tentatives des manifestants ont été vouées à l'échec à cet endroit. Des bombes à gaz lacrymogènes et les véhicules canons à eau anti-émeute ont été mis à contribution pour stopper l'avancée des marcheurs que même la pluie surprise de ce matin n'avait pas réussi à arrêter. Le point avec Jacques-Yves Molina.
Tout a commencé à la place Pascal, à la Tchangou, où Jean-Pierre Bemba, avec des centaines de manifestants, s'avançait vers le centre-ville. Cette foule scandant des chansons contre l'entérinement de Ronsard Malonda grossissait à force qu'elle avançait. Vu de haut, c'était une marée humaine qui serpentait le boulevard Lumumba, remontant pont Matete avant de gagner l'échangeur de l'IMT, où les autres manifestants attendaient pour grossir le rang. Mais c'était sans compter avec l'important dispositif sécuritaire anti-émeute placé à ce niveau par la police. En effet, le largage de bombes à gaz lacrymogènes ne se sont pas fait entendre pour disperser les manifestants. Une situation décriée par un manifestant.
C'est pas que nous, population, on a le droit de marcher. On a de marcher pour la nation, mais on a tenté de nous faire comme les ennemis, mais on ne sait pas, mais nous tous, nous sommes les Congolais.
Dans cette confusion, Jean-Pierre Bemba réussira à s'exfiltrer pour regagner sa résidence. Notons que quelques manifestants ont été interpellés par la police.
À Lubumbashi, initialement annoncée pour ce lundi, la marche de Lamuka n'a finalement pas eu lieu, tel que le voulaient les organisateurs. D'après nos sources, elle aurait été reportée sur demande de la Fondation katangaise. Toutefois, à certains endroits, certains militants tentaient de s'organiser pendant que la police était déployée sur plusieurs artères de la ville. C'est ce que nous dit Jean-Guel.
D'après une vidéo qui circule sur les réseaux sociaux, on voit les membres de la Fondation katangaise partis ce dimanche soir rencontrer Moïse Katumbi, l'un des organisateurs de la marche. Encore leur président, ils lui ont fait voir que le moment n'était pas indiqué pour organiser cette manifestation, car il y aurait des infiltrés et des gens préparés pour saboter cette marche par des actes répréhensibles qui seraient au bout du compte portés contre lui. Ainsi, ils lui ont demandé de reporter cette manifestation, le temps d'harmoniser avec les autorités pour que cette marche se tienne dans de bonnes conditions. Entre-temps, les dispositifs policiers sont visibles sur certaines artères de la ville, notamment à la grande place de la Poste. Jusqu'à présent, Moïse Katumbi lui-même ne s'est pas encore prononcé à ce sujet, notant que le maire de Lubumbashi a dans un communiqué porté à la connaissance de la population que la marche est interdite car le pays est dans un état d'urgence sanitaire. Malgré cette interdiction, certains partisans de Moïse Katumbi tenaient à marcher coûte que coûte, car, disent-ils, c'est pendant l'état d'urgence sanitaire que la société civile du Haut-Katanga a marché la semaine dernière jusqu'au gouvernorat de province où elle a déposé son mémo entre le maire du gouverneur Jacques Kaboula. Une politique de 2 poids 2 mesures, dénonce-t-il. Lubumbashi, Jean Gandou, Radio Okapi.
Au Nord Kivu, des éléments de la police ont étouffé ce lundi à Béni la marche de Lamuka et du RCD-KML. Le maire intérimaire de cette ville, qui avait interdit la veille cette manifestation, a toutefois reçu une délégation restreinte de responsables de ces organisations politiques pour recevoir leurs déclarations. Le compte rendu de Martial Patrick.
Déjà tôt le matin, des éléments de la police étaient positionnés au rond-point NRA, considéré comme point de départ de toutes les manifestations dans la ville de Béni. Et pendant que les militants de la MOUCA et du RCD-KML s'apprêtaient à partir des celliers pour cette manifestation, la marche a été rapidement étouffée par la police. Une situation dénoncée par Blaise Moussubao, secrétaire exécutif du mouvement social MS Béni, qui s'interroge de l'existence d'un état de droit en RDC.
L'état de droit que prône l'actuel président de la République, on ne sait pas si ça s'exécute où. On reconnaît 3 personnes qui viennent d'être embarquées dans les camionnettes de la police et nos drapeaux ont été déchirés. Quelle police peut déchirer les drapeaux des partis politiques?
Les personnes arrêtées au nombre d'idées sont identifiés comme les cadres du RCD-KML. Selon des sources policières, la police souhaite d'abord les auditionner et obtenir l'avis du procureur près le tribunal de grande instance de Béni sur leur cas en cas de probable libération. Béni, Martial Papi Moukeba, Radio Okapi.
Dans le même temps, au centre du pays, à Kananga, la marche de partis membres de la coalition Lamuka a été également dispersée ce matin par la police. Les organisateurs, transportés par une jeep de la police, ont tour à tour déposé leur mémorandum à la mairie et à la MONUSCO. L'autorité urbaine leur a rappelé le respect de la mesure du gouvernement interdisant toute manifestation en cette période d'état d'urgence. À Kananga, la correspondance de Blaise Dongala.
Débutée vers 8h30 sur l'avenue Lussambo, cette marche a été dispersée à l'aide des gaz lacrymogènes quelques minutes après par les éléments de la police. Les manifestants avec l'air cache-nez s'étonnent d'avoir été réprimés après avoir tout fait dans les respects des mesures barrières. Des d'entre eux s'en sont sortis avec des blessures légères. Dans leur mémorandum, ils exigent entre autres de retrait des propositions de loi Minapou et Sakata qui, selon eux, visent à torpiller le développement de la justice congolaise. Ces manifestants recommandent également les régions de l'entérinement des Rousseurs Maloda et la réforme profonde de la CENI avant toute désignation de ces animateurs, comme indiquent les deux.
La Mouka Kassai centrale exige ce qui suit. Le retrait des lois initiées par Minakou et Sakata, le rejet de l'entérinement de Ronsard Malonda, les réformes profondes de la Commission électorale nationale indépendante préalable à toute désignation de ces futurs animateurs. La dissolution de l'Assemblée nationale, véritable caisse de résonance du FCC.
De son côté, Madame le maire de la ville a rappelé le respect des mesures du gouvernement interdisant toute manifestation à cette période d'état d'urgence. De Kananga, Lezo, Dongala, Mayanda, Radio Okapi.
Et puis à Kalemi, la marche s'est d'abord déroulée sous la surveillance de forces de sécurité qui ont circonscrit le champ d'action des manifestants, mais la Mouka parle de 6 personnes interpellées. Certains journalistes qui couvraient la manifestation ont vu leur matériel de travail ravi par la police qui les a retournés par la suite. La marche organisée à Kongolo a été violemment dispersée par la police. C'est aussi le cas à Mbujimaï où finalement quelques cadres locaux de la Mouka ont été embarqués dans la jeep de la police jusqu'à l'Assemblée provinciale, point de chute de la marche pour y déposer leur mémorandum. À Isiro, enfin, la marche de la coalition Lamuka a aussi été dispersée par la police au niveau du marché central de la ville. Le député provincial du Haut-Ouélé, Hervé Ndouté, membre de cette coalition, parle de l'arrestation de 12 personnes. De son côté, la police nationale congolaise se félicite de son professionnalisme au cours de marches organisées ce lundi matin sur toute l'étendue de la République. À la fin de la marche de la Mouka, le porte-parole de la PNC affirme n'avoir enregistré aucun cas de décès, blessés, ni aucun dégât matériel et que la situation est calme sur toute l'étendue de la République. Pour le colonel Pierrot Mwanamputu, les quelques militants interpellés ont déjà été relâchés, à l'exception des bandits communément appelés Kuluna. Le colonel Pierrot Mwanamputu est au téléphone de Michel Kifindangol.
Il y a un calme relatif sur toute l'étendue du territoire national. On n'a enregistré aucune perte en vie humaine. Alors je pense que c'est le moment de jeter des fleurs aux éléments de la police nationale congolaise qui ont agi avec professionnalisme. Donc il a été demandé qu'on puisse élargir à toutes les personnes interpellées, à l'exception de quelques cas de Kuluna.
Donc, en quelque sorte, tous ceux qui étaient interpellés seront libérés dès ce soir?
Non, ils ont été libérés, à l'exception de Kuluna. Toutes les personnes interpellées ont été libérées. Contrairement à ce qui se trame dans les réseaux sociaux, là,